South
The
Shore? South
yeah,
Shore?
South Shore,
Come
which
on.
kind of has a vibe to it, by the
Stout
way.
and
We'll do
stout. So that's going to be your Thirsty Thursday alternate identity going
Stout
forward.
Shore.
Is
Yeah.
Stout Shore, all stouts are half off. There we go.
Yeah.
We got promotion talk going early this week. See, I'm a
There we
regular
go.
listener.
That's a good promotion.
He gets it high in the air. Left field. This one's got a chance. And let's go on a cowhide. Joyride. Sound the horn. The RailCats clear the yard.
Hello, RailCats fans, and welcome back to the RailCats Talk podcast. He's Chuck Polarek. I'm Kyle Svetich. I have two very special guests. One might be a creepy shadow that pops in and out. That is Nick from the Indy Ball Report, and then you have Ryan from Indy Ball Nation. Confusing, but it makes itself out. If you guys don't know, they do the Indy Ball Report once a week that does come out on Saturdays. They cover every independent baseball league that's out there. Very informative, very intelligent. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves a little bit more, and then we'll get into why we decided to bring you on. So Nick, I'll start with you.
Cool. Awesome. We're going to start in the shadow realm. Like it.
I was so happy you didn't start with me. I was like, I don't know what to say, so let's make it a you problem, my guy.
So, Ryan, we're going to need to know where's your hometown? What's your major? Get through all your icebreakers.
Last for your social.
Yeah.
Mother's maiden
What's your
name.
mother's maiden name again?
Yeah.
What was your first pet's name?
Yeah. Best friend in grade school.
Just real quick. Let's just
Yeah.
get that over.
I'll just write that down. Don't worry about it. You may get a new Capital One bill in the mail, but don't worry about that. Uh, so yeah, Nick did the Indie Ball Report podcast on year 7 now of that. For those that listen to the show, you already kind of know the deal. For those that don't, pretty much, I grew up going to independent league games, mainly the Newark Bears, but certainly Somerset as well. So that's kind of where I got first really introduced to baseball and whatnot, and always been a fan of that. And I kind of like that. I guess the name that you recognize, and you always kind of go like, "Oh, that's what he's doing now," and like those kind of players. But I also like kind of bring out guys that are underknown, never really got the time of day from a major league scout, or looking to really cut their teeth, make their name, and have a chance to, I guess, live their dream. And as far as the reason for starting the show and whatnot, I always kind of wanted to do like a podcast for really from like 2016, 2017, 18. I was always like, oh, that's kind of cool just to go on and start talking and whatnot, and just pick something here. And so when it became time to start the show in 2019, I had narrowed it down to like three main things. One was hockey, but I was like, there are so many different hockey podcasts that like you're never going to find your footing in there. Like, yeah, sure, you may get some numbers, but like you're never going to really stand out or be that important in the scene. So I kind of like disregarded, didn't want to be just another one in the crowd. The other one, and those that remember this league, bonus points to you, was a podcast on the Alliance of American Football, the AAF,
Mm.
which is a very short-lived spring league that I was into for the sole reason that Tim Lewis was a head coach. And Tim Lewis is a really cool guy. I won't explain the whole reasoning because I assume that Kyle and Chuck don't want their show to last as long as ours does, which is 5 hours at a clip because
Right.
we hate ourselves.
Yes.
And it comes with the territory naturally. And I obviously decided not to go that route. I thought that was even a little too niche and also like, I don't really know that much when it comes to football, but I do know a little bit about baseball, and independent baseball was sitting right there. And being that I'm in northern New Jersey at that time, I had Somerset, I had Sussex, I had New Jersey, technically Long Island right there. The formerly, but now current, or formerly Rockland Boulders, but now New York Boulders. So there was a bunch of teams that were right there, easy to cover. And so I was like, oh, cool, I'll do that. And so here we are 7 years later, co-host number 3. We're still here and talking about baseball and trying to be entertaining and being extremely long-winded. So that's where I'm at.
Well, you got to start somewhere, right? And you've
True.
you've done yourself really, really well, I would say on that front of it, especially having to deal with three people, being the main guy, and then now you bring Ryan in, who I think at one point you had locked away in your attic. I have
Yeah,
a I have a
Yeah.
Ryan that's locked in my cage. So if anyone gets confused, I'm not talking
that
about the Ryan here, but I do have a
that
Ryan that's stuck in the cage. He's our producer.
that is the proper way to keep a Ryan in a cage. Maybe a small dish of water. That's
I
the way
can't
to
see a
get it.
problem with that. Yeah, no, that tracks.
Well, I guess we'll let Ryan out of the cage or out of the attic so he can introduce himself and get everyone familiar with Ryan and Indie Ball Nation.
Yeah, Indie Ball Nation's a garbage fire. It was, I mean, I worked in minor league baseball back in the day a bit, like 2014, 2015, we're talking, and then sort of followed a couple passion projects and then ended up in a corporate gig, which I hated. So I was like, well, I need to do something that will be slightly entertaining to me and also maybe open a door down the road. So I started ALPB Roundup with just the timing of, I don't even know. It started in January of 2020. So, for those of you who don't know, no Atlantic League baseball was played in 2020. So, I got a
Really?
full year of talking about transactions and roster building, and then roster unbuilding, and then whatever else was going on. And then, yeah, that was fun. And then 2021 was cool. I ended up with a job that I briefly had with one team in Lexington. I've had like off and on things, just sort of like helping out in spot situations with a couple teams over time. But
In
it,
fairness, it
it
was 2 teams.
it was two teams, right? It was the Genomes as well, doing social media and baseball operations for the Legends. It was a garbage fire for sure. So that's really what inspires everything I do. Then, yeah, I did sort of change gear after that. I was excited to sort of expand a little more because I wasn't enough in Nick's territory. I decided to change it over to Indie Ball Nation, not just Atlantic League focus, and open it up a little bit. And yeah, I kind of just am into it. I've always been a baseball fan. I discovered Indie Ball in like 2019. Like, my wife and I that year, well, she was my girlfriend at the time, and we just went to a ton of games together. And I don't know, we just were into going to a bunch of games that year. And by the end of it, we were just sort of out of things to do. Minor league baseball kind of wrapped up, but we were still in that part where the Atlantic League was playing. So we ended up in Lancaster, York, and Somerset like 3 weekends in a row. And in that time, I went from, oh, indie ball, I wonder what this is like, to being like, well, this is my entire personality now. That's good. And haven't looked back since. So having a time, just love the fact that I think it's sort of it's a really authentic baseball scene when you think about it. It's a little bit of the Island of Misfit Toys, which is very much what baseball was in the early days, mixed with all the modern trimmings of baseball and the same drama on small and large scales. I think it's great, man. So I'm in it because I love a good story, and baseball's my favorite story. So
Yeah, I started listening to the Indie Ball report. I think 2 or 3 episodes before Ryan came in, so I think there was quite a bit of time there
Uh,
where Nick was a little bit solo, and I know he was dreading that for a little bit, and then Ryan came on. So
wasn't
yeah,
that much. You probably hopped in right about the time he started doing solo, if I'm honest, because that gap wasn't super long.
it
You were
wasn't super.
fast.
wasn't.
It wasn't
Yeah,
super like
no.
I remember. I don't remember the original or the one before Ryan, but he was like it was like 2 or 3 episodes I listened to, and he's like, "All right, I'm dipping." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then Nick's like, "I gotta
Yeah,
find someone else." And
yeah. Will up and left me because he
yeah,
went to go
yep.
work for the Coyette Kettleers. Coyette Kettleers.
Gross.
Just gotta say
Well,
it 2 times in a row. Big Hank Scorpio. Coyette Kettleers.
So stupid.
well,
Worst.
I figured I would return the favor. I know the last time that or the first time I joined you guys
Yes.
was the awful Cleburne series game that I
Oh,
still try to take out of my head.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I know you guys were discussing throughout your shows, kind of wanting to
yes.
do a rebuild or a GM kind of day for the RailCats, and I said, well, what better idea than steal their idea and throw them on my podcast and call it a day?
Hmm.
Um,
Well played.
Fair.
Well
That's how we got to
played.
do
No
things around here.
notes.
but anyway, so I want you guys to have your time, and I know you'll probably have your own discussions later on and not be
Yeah.
so Gary focused and other people are like, who's Gary? Why are we caring about Gary? And don't you get shot there? That's
Yeah.
beside the point. But anyways, really what I want you guys to dive into, maybe the Lamar era, and things that you may have seen that you may disagree with, and is it the situation that Lamar's in? Is it him as a manager? Or is it maybe the lack of baseball ops or the lack of knowledge of something along the lines of that you guys would change differently in Gary that might help improve?
And
Oh, we're going right into it.
on
Okay.
top of it,
Yeah.
throw other teams under the bus.
Yeah, that too.
Oh, I mean, like I live to do that, but
Well, my
uh,
first one under the bus is I still have Twitter up and the American Association posting the Cooper Edwards graphic, but misspelling South Shore really hurts.
Oh,
oh,
Yeah, that's tough. That's
ooh.
tough.
Oh, I guess I could
I
go on
always
Twitter
love
real
that.
quick.
Yeah,
Ooh.
sorry to sidetrack you that fast, but
Ryan, do
uh
you mean X? Do you mean
I
X,
don't.
Yeah.
sir?
I don't mean
You
X
don't.
actually. I can promise you I don't mean that. Uh,
Oh,
all right. I
terrible.
don't know.
Mm.
I was really hoping we wouldn't open with this topic as I fill the rest of my drink up.
Oh, well, I mean, we can
Uh,
start with whatever
Oh, they
topic you
oh no,
want
did.
no,
to,
we're
but
in
I
it.
was just,
Yeah, don't back it up here.
I,
We're
hey,
I'll start
listen,
there. It's fine.
I asked you if you were ready. You're like, yeah, I'm ready. Just feeling some looseness. So I figured, well, might as well just jump right into it.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get my preface out of the way on this because I'm just gonna jump in here on Nick, which
Uh,
is
South
the
Shore? South
yeah,
Shore?
South Shore,
Come
which
on.
kind of has a vibe to it, by the
Stout
way.
and
We'll do
stout. So that's going to be your Thirsty Thursday alternate identity going
Stout
forward.
Shore.
Is
Yeah,
Stout Shore all stouts are half off. There we go.
yeah.
We got promotion talk going early this week. See, I'm a
There we
regular
go. That's
listener.
a good promotion.
Yeah. We
Ah,
waited 30 minutes last week before we even talked about promotion. Now, granted, it's been about 35 minutes
It
before we even got to
it's
start it,
not
but
even it's
see?
not even union night at the ballpark. So best thing will do
Which
numbers.
can I just say though, when we discovered Union Night, we were like, this might be one of the best promotions here.
Yeah,
That was some of the
brilliant.
most fun we had on the show this past year. Is
Yeah,
of course it's Union Night in Gary. That is
yeah.
terrific. It works
It,
so
it
well.
worked.
It fits the
smart.
identity.
Yeah, 100,
It was great.
100% beautiful work.
Yes.
I'm just gonna start. I mean, if we're gonna start with talking about the manager spot, I will say, indie ball manager is like one of, I firmly believe, the toughest managing gig in professional baseball. It's just the amount of things you need connections wise and to get things to fall into place. It's crazy. And then any added challenge of if you're not sort of the top league and if you're not the top destination or you are one of the whereas one of the lower destinations in the pecking order, it's such an uphill battle and you need so many things to get lined up to be able to get momentum. So at no point in this conversation do I want any critiques of the work being done to be me saying I could do it better or that like I think Lamar is a bad manager. I think my guy's fighting a tough battle here. Do I agree with necessarily how he always fights it? Not necessarily, but that's where I'm coming from. Nick, would you like to get anything out of the way before you start
Yeah,
anything?
I'll co-sign a lot of that. I
Hey,
I always like to say whenever we start a season on the show is when we critique players or managers, we're not saying that we can do it better, and we acknowledge that particularly with the player side of things, if you're being paid to play baseball, you're in the upper like 2 or 3% of ball players in the world because someone's paying you to perform a service, and that service happens to be playing baseball, and that they are notably better than I will ever be. That said, we are grading you comparatively to the rest of the league and the expectation that, you know, the expected value you would bring to your team. So we're not saying they're bad. We're saying that relative to the expectation, they're not living up to it. And it's not a matter of, trying to just tear down a guy for the sake of doing it or trying to just disrespect or, be mean to a guy. It's just a matter of a lot of times when we're talking and we're getting into it, it's more like we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the actual baseball discussion and just kind of laying it bare like X player just wasn't doing enough. They're not walking enough relative to how often they're striking out. The ball's not going into play, and we're just stating it bluntly. It's not meant to be mean or anything of that nature. It's just we get caught up in the conversation a lot. And I do acknowledge these are still very high level players. It's just, you know, I'm going to grade off of what's there to grade off of. And I'm going to grade it relative to your competition because that's at the end of the day what you're doing every time you take the field. You're competing against and comparing yourself against everybody else. And if you're good, you're going to rise to the top and you're going to earn the praise. If you're not, then there's going to be questions asked about it. And that's kind of the preface I want to give also going forward here.
yeah, my first scouting assignment was myself, and it was to deem that I sucked at baseball and had to stop playing. So, like,
Yeah.
we'll all just remember that over anything I say. Um, if there's a ball that hit the dirt, I swung at it. I guess if we are starting, I mean, it's hard because it's like the whole thing really
Oh, okay,
is.
so let's take the whole question and shrink it down.
There we go.
Uh, let's just look at last year for
Okay.
example. I
Mhm.
would say that last year was a year of higher expectations.
That's
I
Really?
think
I
That's
that
disheartening to hear.
well, I think throughout the league and where they were going, they should have had higher expectations with the people they were bringing in. They were bringing in more power
Right.
bats. I
yeah.
understand the pitching staff was a bit of concern because we weren't sure who was going to be starting, but Lamar started to bring in names that like a Carlos Rincon or Guillermo Quintana, who a God as an LG Castillo, all those kinds of players that were showing prior to coming in to doing something. You know, you bring in a Carlos Sanabria who has MLB experience. You
Mm,
bring in a Franklin Perez who was traded for Justin Verlander.
Mhm.
yeah.
Coming off injury. So I think the expectations were a little bit higher, and they fell
Yeah.
significantly short.
Yeah, I would say I do agree because I remember in my preview, I was like, I think Gary could really contend for a playoff spot this year. I like them because they'd finished, if I'm not mistaken, only 4.5 back of a playoff spot in 23. And there were some signs that were encouraging. Like I'm looking right now, I have what they did in 23 compared to the league average. And you're like, yeah, the batting was slightly below, but we're talking literally 9 points below.
Mhm.
I'm not losing sleep over that. And there were signs where it's like, okay, Lamar's going to get his guys in, and once he has his guys implement his system, then it's going to be good. And so I see what you're saying, where there was an expectation, like, okay, they're going to take a step now, and then it kind of never materialized.
Yeah, I guess we as RailCats fans going through
Yes.
the that 2023 season, they started getting rid of the players that have been around for a while. Alec Olid,
Yeah.
your Daniel Langlois, your John Sheeks. They started getting rid of
Yeah,
those
that
players,
midseason sell-off was interesting.
and so you would assume that Lamar had his guys, and all the guys that you had some kind of connection to him when he was managing that low A, high A with Houston
Hmm.
and winning championships and so on and so forth. I mean, you get a Miguel Sierra, trade him for a John Sheeks and a Daniel Legua because you have that connection. So you start bringing in these connections. So I think that's why we assumed we're getting all these players that are coming in that have been familiar with Lamar and should be producing at a higher level and just quite weren't. Um,
But there's got
Yeah.
to, so I would assume no matter what manager it is,
Hmm.
anybody could bring in talented guys like this and have a flop of a season, no matter what manager.
Mhm.
But I think that the key to the manager is how do you manage when you see things start going downhill? How do you right the ship and point it upwards? And I think that's something that we didn't see last year at all. Was okay, these guys are struggling, so I'm going to stay with them while they struggle. Everybody's struggling. We're going to stay with everybody while all the other teams are still making trades and or releasing and picking up people, and we're sitting on the same people for a majority of the season. And then it's like,
Hmm.
oh, I guess this isn't going to work out. So now we need to cut people for budget problems and bring in some young guys, and up season's over with.
Yeah. I would also say is like, and I'm just doing a quick look through here across the baseball reference page, and like one of the things that does jump off to me, and I didn't watch as many games in preparation for this as much as I'd like to. I was hoping to get through six, and I only got through about two. But it seems like there was a very aggressive mindset at the plate here. There's not a lot of walks here. There's a good amount of strikeouts comparatively
Yeah.
to games played. And that inherently is going to be an issue if you're not getting the ball in play, if you're not getting guys on base. I, you're kind of setting it up. And I know the one game I watched here, which probably isn't the best sample size, 'cause it was 1-0 win over Winnipeg. I want to say it was the June 18th game to be exact here. And it took a while for the pitch count on Landon Barassa to
Mhm.
really get up. And I was watching that going like, there's a lot like just swing, swing, swing here. And I understand you're going against a quality pitcher. Landon's a good guy, and you want to make something happen. And I believe the weather was so-so. I remember halfway through the broadcast, like, oh, it's starting to rain a little bit. So there's mental things here. It's a Canadian trip too. There's factors and all that, but you gotta work the count a little bit. You know he's a good pitcher. Make him use pitches. Get into the bag a little bit. And like that was something I was noticing. Now I will say that didn't go on the whole game. And like Del Valle was one guy that really did change his play appearance throughout that game. The first at bat, I was like, this is not a great AB from him. And then the second one he came up was a fantastic at bat. I liked what I saw out of it. So there was a correction made there. But just sweeping with the generalization, I'm sure as we get into the episode, we'll break that down and get more specific and get to the heart of certain issues here. But generally, it does seem like that was kind of an issue that we weren't working counts, we weren't being selective of what we were swinging at. That seemed to be a bit of a problem. And if that's going to be an issue and it's going to stay that way for guys that are played, 70 plus games, it's not going to work out. 70 is enough of a sample size for us to say, like, okay, I think this might be what it is.
Now, you watched a Winnipeg game in Winnipeg?
It was Winnipeg and Winnipeg, and then the other one I had watched was
So
the May
with
18th
Gary?
in Gary against Lake Country.
Yeah, with Gary, half of our team doesn't go
Yeah.
to Winnipeg.
Yeah. That's the
That's-
other that's what
that's-
I'm trying to get to. I'm going to find my spot on that.
Well, that-
Unreal.
So I don't have the numbers in front, but right now we don't have any player that we signed that has any kind of ties to international
Okay.
anywhere. So
Okay, so
everyone
they're-
it should be American based.
Okay, so they're not
Well-
Visa players. Okay.
So
Well, also Visa, if I remember, Visa prices just went
Yeah,
up
they're
last year
expensive.
too. So like, especially the lower budget teams, like, well, do we really need to
Yeah, to go that way.
hit the islands?
And I guess to get into the Chuck's point earlier, talking, I think the big thing with last year was there wasn't a lot of turnover, and in your guys' opinion, is that no, not a lot of turnover due to the amount of Visa players?
How do you? So you mean like
Like,
not having a lot of?
he thinks that because you have a $1,200 investment in a player that you're going to stick to him a little bit longer than if you don't have that $1,200.
It's possible, but that's not a good sign. It's not what I would recommend. You know what I mean? Like I'm not saying that isn't the case, but I'm saying like it probably shouldn't be the case if it is. If that makes sense.
From what I had been told, heard, we were leaving 11, 12 players at the border when we'd go to Winnipeg, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is because it was multifaceted. But one of the things you have to go to Canada is you have to have a valid visa that's up to date. And the other thing is that you have to have some sort of a like an interview or a meeting or something for them to give you the sign off that you can come in, right?
Mhm.
And my understanding is that we had people that had expired visas. It was okay for them to play, but it wasn't okay for them to cross the border. And when you run into a case like that, you're not necessarily paying the $1,200 for the visa anyways, or however much it is for the visa.
I get. I guess my more concern is not so much like the Canada trip, but just in general, if you have to re-up all of these visas or try to get them into play. I mean, the big one was Jesus Mariaga, who couldn't get in because something with his visa, and we knew that was going to be an issue, and he couldn't get back into the United States to play. He stayed on the roster the entire time. I know I forget someone mentioned something why they kept him on, but it's just one of those like. Did Lamar feel that having to spend this X amount of dollars on this player, I'm going to have to see him through? Because if we're working with the money side of it, it's not like Gary's a gold mine and you're pumping out tons of money.
Right. I think
The issue with like a Mariaga, he's in Venezuela. He could quite possibly have a Colombian passport, or a Colombia visa. But from from having Julio, who's from the same area, For his parents, for his mom and his brother to get the interview, to get the visa to come
Mhm.
over. Okay. This was back in 2023.
Mhm.
They were not able to schedule something until the summer of 2025.
Yeah.
So you're talking a year and a half, 2 years for you to get the meeting to even get the opportunity to get the visa to the US. And that was through Colombia. Venezuela, you don't have Venezuela, you
Yeah,
can't.
that's not going to work.
So that was through Colombia. And the response that Colombia had was go somewhere else because you can get it sooner.
Yeah, and a lot of this, like to bring it back, because I think actually all of this that we talked about already is kind of related. What and I pointed at Lamar a lot, but I don't know the ins and outs of like the actual front office enough to say it's a Lamar thing. Is that I think so much of indie ball is you are going to run into disasters because, it's just the way it's set up to be. It's guys just deciding they're done. It's guys who were one thing and then they got to town, they were not the guy you thought you were getting. It was, they're not in shape or they just aren't, the velo isn't what was said or what it appeared to be. It's a guy gets signed, which is great, but now you're in the middle. Now you're in Cleburne and you're a short player. Like, and a lot of it is, I think, the ability to set up something that is prepared to deal with that. Because you mentioned earlier, you didn't see a lot of like almost pivoting as things went, and I think it is a lot of their. You need an infrastructure set up personally as somebody running the thing, and also around you that can quickly react to something. And I always say if you want to like the measure of quality teams in indie ball, look at longest losing streaks because the well, it's obvious, like sure, the worst teams are going to lose more, but it figures every team's going to have a tough streak at some point. But the best teams at what they do are quick to like, all right, let's whatever's going wrong here. Maybe we're mid road trip and we're short guys. I can call a guy up. I can get him in town tomorrow when he's quality, and he can be a bit of a stopper for us. And I feel like Gary tends to lack that for whatever reason, and that goes back to like kind of all of this, which is like being prepared with thinking in the off season, okay, who realistically can we get here on visas in time? Who can we bring into Winnipeg with us? Like this is stuff that they shouldn't be reacting to. They should be proactive on. And that's the thing that worries me. Having a bad team is excusable as anything. Like I can totally get it. Like Lake Country was a tough situation a couple years ago. They remember they had to make the manager change like a week into the season.
Yeah, it was like 9 games in, 12 games in.
Right. I mean, if you look like Lake Country, they were below 500 a year ago. Cleburne was a 46 win team a year ago, and sure Cleburne made changes at the top, but Lake Country was more. I use them as an example because they've done a nice job with it. Is they they kind of got it settled in, took that first year, learned, built out something, and were able to get something smoother. And I think it was kind of a tough indictment for Gary that Lake Country was able to bump 7 games up,
Hmm.
while Gary was losing 11 games of ground. Like because in my head I was like, well, Cleburne got really good, and I realized Cleburne only beat them one more time than they did the year before when it comes to Gary. I was like,
Hmm.
so it's something else, and I think a lot of it comes back to the structure, and I feel like things maybe are a little too on the fly. I don't know if that's by choice or because it just has to be, but that is the first thing to solve. There needs to be a system in place, and I feel like it's easy for me to say from the outside there isn't one, but it certainly feels like there isn't one.
Hmm.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I, I know you guys talk about Gary being a hard place to recruit for. And is that because of the outside world viewing Gary as what Gary has been in the past, or is it something else related to that? Because uh, from Chuck and I's perspective, we talk a lot to the visiting players because we do sit on the visiting side most of the time, and uh, a lot of them compliment how the clubhouse, how well that's set up, how well the field plays. Just the environment itself feels like a professional environment versus going to Lake Country, who just built a stadium and it looks like they put up a cinder block and two seats. yeah, on the side, stadium seats.
Yeah.
I,
Damn, dunk in
you,
a Lake Country. All right.
well, and then they talked about Chicago. They built this brand new
Well,
stadium in
cats and dogs.
Chicago,
Yeah.
and their clubhouse is in center field.
Right.
So it's just like, so in your guys' perspective,
Hmm.
what is on the outside world? Why do you think it's so hard to recruit to Gary?
I think the
I mean,
perception is definitely part of it. I think there's no way around that. I think that's part of it. Um,
let's not act
I'm
like also
yeah.
this team doesn't have a history of winning. I mean, they've had more winning seasons than losing seasons.
Th
Like
that's
Gary has been Gary for a long time, but there was something that worked.
they
And
they
sure, it could be
were.
Greg Taggart, let's be honest, but
It could
Yeah.
be.
you know.
Not to cut you off, Ryan, but
No, you're
uh,
good. I just
they
realized it's probably Gary or Greg rather.
well, it's Gary was winning when Gary was at its height, basically in that early 2000, mid 2000. That's when I know it's a little bit earlier on as well in that, but that's when it started. I think more people were scared of going to Gary at that point, and it started to run itself down. But it's not like they don't have a winning culture there because they've had a winning culture. So is it a change in manager, not having someone that's been there for 20 odd years and you know what you're getting to a manager that really hasn't been independent baseball? I understand he was with St. Paul as a hitting coach,
Mhm.
but outside of that, he's been in affiliate ranks.
I'll make my thoughts on this, and then I'll kick back to Nick because I'm interested to see what he thinks. My
Yeah.
perspective is it's definitely a mix. I think it's part of it is if you have a bunch of, for lack of a better term, like kind of mid-league teams that you can go to spread across the American and the Frontier. A lot of the time, even if it's good teams versus bad teams, you'll go to a situation that seems better. Gastonia is still signing guys, and they weren't successfully paying people 2 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
new ownership there,
Yeah.
but it was there were some good players that went to
Oh,
Gastonia
yeah.
and came back, and I'm like, there were guys not getting paychecks like 2 months ago. But I digress. I think the other piece is, yeah, there's some perception, but I think there is a reputation for dysfunction at this point a little bit, and that's something that guys, it's the number one thing I seem to see is, and that's why I'm trying to get like a player survey going, almost like the NFL does, where they do a player survey about ownership of different teams. So guys, it kind of is a public, that's more like publicly shame owners in my opinion, but this is would be more for, there's so many guys you hear about getting into things with teams where they're like, wow, this is a mess. I would have never signed up for this. It does seem to be, you just want to focus on playing ball when you're doing it, and I think that's part of it. The last thing I had on it was I think it is a sales pitch. Recruiting, it is like college sports in a way where you're pitching to guys that are, they have other options on the table all the time. And I think Greg certainly had years of experience on how to sell Gary, the experience, what the setup will be, what has worked in the past, what doesn't. So you know what to focus on. And I think there's a learning curve there. Maybe Lamar just struggled with it, or whoever is trying to help out with it has struggled with it. I think that's probably part of it.
That's interesting because I have a totally different view of that.
Really? No,
Well, let's get what I want to hear Nick's
Absolutely.
okay. And
side,
then
and
I'd
then
love
we'll
to
get
hear
to
what you
Chuck.
think,
Yeah.
Chuck.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say part of it is you really have two different types of guy, right? The one that wants to just keep playing, they're happy to keep playing. If they get signed, great. And then the other one that their goal is either to get back to or get to for the first time to affiliated ball. And if that's the case, then you're looking for the situation that's A, going to highlight your talent the best, and B, where are guys getting signed out of? And so if you're noticing like they're only getting like one, maybe two guys signed a year from here, but this other team that's offered me a contract had three or four guys, or has a manager that's been around a bit, has better connections, they know so and so or whatnot. It's a little bit more of like, oh, okay, maybe I go that route there. I mean, I'm sure Ryan's aware of it, and you guys maybe too, but like there's almost like I don't want to call them clubs in Florida, but everyone has like their little clique in Florida when it comes like to February, March, and you'll always see it on the social medias or wherever it may be. Where you're like, oh, these six managers are all cool together, and then you have this other clique, and that's kind of your basis where guys you I don't want to say you have like a quid pro quo, but you have like a handshake agreement where like, hey, if I got a guy that I can't use, I'm throwing it into the group chat with you guys first. You want him, take him. We'll send him there and I'll vouch for you guys and whatnot. And the longer that group's together, the more connections you get, the more you know, and all that kind of thing. I think that's part of it. And a lot of times you'll have one or two guys that are like, oh, wow, that's like a big time major league name. Like, I know for a while, like a guy like Hal Lanier was in there. And obviously, Hal Lanier's got major league connections. A guy like, say, Brooks Carey probably has better connections there. Pete Incaviglia, it goes without saying, but Pete's obviously an outlier in this all. So, when you have like that one tent pole in your group, it's a lot easier to be able to get guys signed. And, if you, another part of it is location. I think Gary can still work. They're not that far from Chicago to where it would be that big of a problem. But like you want to be where scouts are going to say, yeah, I'm traveling anyway. I'll stop here and watch the first half of this game, see if anyone pops up on my radar. And so you guys are going to look for that situation. So I think that's part of it. So if you're not offering guys the best situation for them personally or giving them the best situation to get signed, it's going to be tough. Now, I don't know what Gary's situation is and setup is there, but that's part of it. And if I had it available, this is really why I need to do my due diligence on creating my contract purchase list from just the graphics I made all of last year. But I don't recall there being too many purchases. I think there was one pitcher early in the year that got signed from Gary, if I'm not mistaken. And then from there, I don't recall there being all too much, although I think the American Association was down last year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be off on that, though. But generally, I guess to summarize my thought is, for the upper level guys, higher level guys, if they don't see a viable pathway to either getting to Mexico, Asia, or affiliated ball, it's going to be tougher to bring them in. And I don't currently know who's that guy in Gary that's kind of, helping them get the foot in the door. Maybe it's Lamar from the time with Houston. Perhaps it's that. I don't know though.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I talked to a pitcher last year. Great guy.
Okay.
One of the top 5 pitchers in the league for a couple of years now. And he had switched teams. And I asked him specifically why, hey, what made you decide to hop over there? And he said proximity to the airport, because
Yeah.
he had heard that the reason why certain pitchers get picked up is because they can quickly get to a major airport and fly out. And because where he was at before, there wasn't a very easy route to an airport, he thought that might be why he didn't get picked up.
That's huge. Yeah. That was the thing with Lexington. It was nice because he had Cincinnati and Lexington right there. And then I think all the way back in like the Ricky Henderson days, he picked Newark because of the airport.
Yeah.
Because you would think like, why wouldn't there's other places to go? Newark is kind of random. But yeah, he chose Newark because the airport was right there. So that has been a thing in Indy ball for sure. So that's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was
Still,
Yeah.
my going back to what you were saying, Ryan.
right.
I do not view Taggart as a manager for today in American Association.
Yeah.
I view Taggart as a guy that could spot talent from young guys, and he could essentially make a team out of an extended college, right? So he'd take the guys out of college and extend their playing for a couple of years and get a little bit more out of them. And that's how he won. I don't think that mindset works in the American Association today. Go to what you mentioned, Lake Country. When Lake Country, they essentially stopped going after the young talent, and they said, hey, let's bring in experienced XMLB guys or guys that have been at the top. Let's bring them in. This is the expectation. If you don't meet it, you're gone. That was their mindset, and they won, right? You can go to Cleburne in 2023. They started off really bad, and they cut a majority of their team and ended up, retreading the whole thing and said, okay, this is what we're going to run with. And they ended up competing. I think they were right above us. We were in last place, or no, they made the playoffs. We didn't because of the last series.
Hmm.
You've got a
Hmm.
comparing a Lamar in his scenario now. I don't think is fair to compare him to a Taggart who was winning in a way that wouldn't win today. Um, and so he could recruit guys out of college because these were guys that weren't necessarily going to play somewhere else. And hey, I can get you a few years and I can get you in front of some people and come play for me. Okay, sounds great. I get paid to play baseball. I'm in, right? And today it's, well, don't know if I want to do that now. Well, don't know if I really want to play there, and I think it's a different story.
I
Uh,
That's a good point.
I think that Lamar's thing is, and you mentioned, the connections. You have to have a lot of baseball connections, and that's one
Mhm.
of the things that I noticed is that yeah, you've got these 3, 4, 5 managers that are like, hey, you can have this player, I need this player, and working together and kind of colluding, and then
Mhm.
you've got these other guys that are kind of on the fringe, expected to be able to do the same with less.
Yeah.
Uh, but like like Kyle had said, when we sit there and we talk to other teams, and I'm talking to some of the best players on the other teams, and I'm like, hey, how about next year come play for Gary? And you know what they respond to me with? Money. Gary doesn't pay. I've had I've had top players for other teams, and I'm like, I think they have a salary cap. I don't think they could pay really that much anyways. And their response is they can find a way to pay. Other teams do it.
Hmm.
And so you're like, okay, how do you compete with that if it's not a level playing field?
Yeah. So that's one thing. I mean, I hear a little bit of both sides on whether or not Gary pays. It might come down to how they pay more often because I rarely will. I'll get the occasional look at the books essentially from the other side of because it's public within the league what guys are signed for. And there's always some guys signed to Gary where I'm like, you paid him what? And that's a weird one. And I don't know what to make of that because I don't really know the ins and outs of the relationships involved and the attitude of like ownership to spending. But so I guess I'm saying I'll circle back to that in a second. I do find it interesting on the connection front. I tend to ask as much as I can when I talk to somebody within the league or within a team. What do you know about, especially when it comes to the American and leagues out there, like the West Division and the Frontier and the Pioneer, because I can't get out there as much, so it's if at all. So it's a lot of, who can chat with so and so to see if they can come talk to me about whatever, because I'm curious about, what's going on. And the number of people when I bring up Lamar who are like, yeah, I don't really know Lamar like that is I hate that it's becoming a very big Lamar conversation here because there's a lot of other things going on, but it's kind of crazy for 3 years in the league. The number of people are like, yeah, I don't really know Lamar. I'm like, that's that's wild. That's not a good sign. When it comes to the money thing, I wish I did know more. I just know that uh, if we're talking about the salary cap, I've always viewed it as, yeah, the salary cap is a financial commitment, like to have to pay when you compare it to the minor league teams that don't need to pay any of their players. But it shouldn't be prohibitive. Like the if you're not spending up to the cap, you're only saving a few $1,000s a year, which yeah, if you're really tight on budget, that's one thing, but I'd like to think, I mean, there are teams that are, putting artificial caps on their own budget, but I have a hard time telling where Gary is in that metric because I do hear from guys they don't pay. I see paperwork that says certain guys do get paid and I can't really tell why. So I don't more questions than answers on that front, man. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I guess to the bigger thing, if we're talking on-field product, I don't know. I think my issue with Lamar is I'm bothered by the lack of progress and concerned by the lack of, well, I guess by the how bad the fall off was this past year. But I'm not saying they can't do it with him. I just think whether it's an operations person or not, again, it's all tough to do solo. as I said, there has to be a process because I was trying to think like how would I operate in this environment, right? Where it's tough because it was easy when I was in Lexington because PJ knows everybody and Lexington was a desirable spot to be. And the way I keep thinking it has to go is like you kind of have to focus on guys that you can, because Nick, you brought it up. Like,
Yeah.
guys are really in tune with how many people get signed. I mean, the Frontier League took a step back, and so did the American Association just a little bit in how many guys are getting signed. And I've had a dozen players reach out to me specifically about that to ask what's going on with that. And I think if you can almost aim not even at a win now mentality, but on young talent who can get signed, you can really start to become an attractive destination based on that. And then from there, it's about intelligently upgrading by way of finding young guys. And yeah, some will get signed, some will be good, but won't get signed. Then you have to be willing to let go of the guys that don't work out. And then bring the new ones in. And yeah, it's going to be there's going to be some rough games. There's going to be some guys that don't work all at the same time, and it's going to be a bad couple weeks, and you got to move. But I think it has to be there, and there's going to be some painful ones. And I almost sometimes think there's a determination to like make what's happening work when it should just be a willingness to be like, all right, this didn't happen. What are we doing now? And I don't know. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse a little bit on that one, so I'll free up to other people. And if we want to talk about
Yeah.
other stuff involving Gary, I'm down.
I will say one thing that I did notice is like, I say, let me try that without the stroke. One thing I noticed that was a substantial drop off was things like stolen bases, right?
Hmm.
Last year in 23, it was 143, tied for fourth in the league, and 21 better, or not 21, 11 better than the average. But this year was 79, notably below average and 12th in the league. That's clearly was part of the game plan last year. You get a guy on, you move him over, and then it changes the dynamic in the game. That kind of disappeared. I don't know if that was, again, some roster flux or the way it was constructed, but that's something. And the other thing, at least that I did notice, was it seemed like all the mid-season replacements were coming from the same source. And I don't know if that's, you know, just because that's the only place that you could go to get them, if that was just
What
you knew what
sources?
you were getting
What
and
sources?
that you felt comfortable with it. I don't know if that's just they would be there the quickest, so that works.
Would that
Uh,
source be the Black Sox, my guy?
Yes.
well, perhaps it would
What
be
I
the
thought.
Black
Which I'm not
Sox.
saying.
I'm trying to avoid an angry DM, Ryan.
I publicly have said I'm a supporter of the Black Sox, so I'll say it. Like the Black Sox play an important role in things. They are not meant to be your primary
Hmm.
resource. They are meant as a supporting resource, because they have a collection of guys. They don't have a full team of dudes at any given time that you can just grab and go with. Like, and I think Joe would be fine with me saying that as well, because I also know what the angry DM. So I feel like he would be like, yeah, fair.
But getting into that conversation, you kind of need that though. Even you still need something. You're getting players that are still actively doing something because if you didn't have a league like that, you just pull a random guy off of a
No,
couch.
I'm with you. I mean, as I said, I'm cool with the
Oh
Black
no, no,
Sox
no,
doing
I was just, I
anything,
was
but
just,
Yeah, my
my
bigger
issue is
thing,
other
yeah,
teams, everyone seems to go to the Black Sox now and then. They can't be, very few teams are
that shouldn't
using
be the
them
first
in the
call.
way that
no,
Gary
I
is. Yeah.
agree, and I think a lot of that had to do with just the amount. I know this year was a little bit weird. I know it's only 12 games necessarily, but going to Winnipeg.
Yeah.
You're playing
Yeah,
12% of your season in Winnipeg, and you're gonna need those guys. And to be honest, when we had those guys in that Winnipeg series when we swept them the first time, it
Yeah.
was all those guys, and they were
Yeah.
producing at a high
yeah,
level. So
Hmm.
it was one of those. "Oh, I found a couple nuggets here, so could I
Yeah.
keep going back to the
yeah,
well and keep grabbing them?" And I think that's what led to it being a primary source was
yeah.
just because of that.
Yeah, Joe's guys, they're never going to cause a problem. They're always going to
Hmm.
compete and they're always going to work hard. Right? That's the kind of guy he gets, and he makes it very clear up front is that if you're not willing to put in the work, if you're not willing to, do what you're supposed to do, don't come here. I don't really want to deal with you. And I like that mentality because it makes you, a more desirable place to go to get your guy signed. So I like that. And every once in a while they do produce a couple guys that are really solid guys. I'm not saying that there's nothing there. There's absolutely guys there. It's just more that when you're in the States, I'm more curious to know why we're not targeting more recent releases from MILB. Why are we not
Mhm.
checking that transaction sheet every day and
Yeah.
picking the names?
That's for an operations person. Sorry,
that's
go ahead, Chuck.
Hmm.
thing that you say that because
Yeah.
that was something that I've been kind of stewing around in my head a lot.
Hmm.
Because we've got a hitting coach, a pitching coach, and Lamar, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't know that um, the hitting coach and or the pitching coach are necessarily bringing much to the table when it comes
Mhm.
to scouting talent or finding talent that aren't already on the team.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's this uh, missing piece where Lamar has to make sure that the clubhouse is running okay, that the guys are all satisfied, that they're in the positions that they need to be. Plus, he's got to sit there and try to scout these other guys to bring them in and put them on the team. And he's got to work out those relationships, and I feel like he's wearing way too many hats that he should have coaches that are able to take that on. And I don't know that they necessarily are. And you can go
I
back to who he had the first year, um, when he was still dealing with Taggart's guys, right? And
yeah.
that was kind of a mess because the attitudes of those, of Tom was good, but the other guy was awful. And then you bring in your own guys, and it's like, okay, we've got a year with these guys. It didn't pan out, but let's get rid of one of our coaches and bring in another field coach. And now we've done it again. We've retreaded this and we're still in the same situation. So we've actually got 2 years where we haven't been bringing in necessarily talent that's been scouted. We've been kind of pulling off of the, hey, I need somebody that can do this. Okay, send the guy over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
That's definitely part of it. And I'm looking at the 2025 roster, at least as according to Point Streak here.
Oh,
I see like Jason Carbonell listed as a coach. I see Ramon Ortiz listed as a hitting coach. I see Lamar obviously listed as manager, and then Kent Willis listed as the pitching coach as well. So there are four coaches here. So there absolutely should be someone that is, doing their due diligence and checking those sheets and calling in and checking in on all these guys. I will say, and I think Ryan was about to touch on it, was this should be something that's baseball ops. Like this would ideal
mhm.
in an ideal world be baseball ops job to go ahead and pour through all of this and help, go through the probably dozens of emails a day you get from guys that are like, here's my drive line data, here's my trackman data, here's my baseball reference page. I love the game and will work very hard. Please sign me, which I'm not going to blame guys for doing that. They absolutely
Right.
should. You got to go market yourself. Actually, Mike Pinto, a guy we had on the show, and we're looking to get back on the show again, was the guy who posed a whole thread on it going, before you send the email, this is what you should include, and this is how
Mhm.
your email should be structured. A good thread on Twitter. If I remember, I can send it over to you guys. But any case, it's like Mike's a whole different animal entirely. He's director of baseball ops and a manager, but he's been doing this for a very long time. He's built in and he's connected here. Ideally, though, you would have that baseball ops department to help with that, to help kind of go through the guys and kind of go, all right, what are we looking for on our roster this year? Okay. And then throughout the year, constantly evaluate and go, all right now we're doing good. We got guys that, can hit for some power. I like where their slugging's at. They're getting on base, and even when they're not, they're hitting dangerous balls. Ones that,
Mhm.
you could see how this could go well. It just didn't that time. That's baseball. It's going to fail more often than it's going to succeed. But what we need a little bit more of are some more competent, fielders, right? Or maybe we need some more contact in the lineup. Get guys who can get on base so that way when we get those big hits, they mean a little more, something like that. So I'll focus now on, you know, looking for that kind of guy, scouting that kind of guy, while the on-field staff can focus on making what they have work until we can get new pieces in. And obviously, you want the communication between on-field guys and the baseball op people, so that way obviously what we're looking for and what you want in a guy and all that. But I think that does kind of go to part of the problem of not having that baseball op department is you're either asking your on-field staff to do a lot more,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, or now it's just not getting done. And that's an even worse problem to have.
Right. Yeah. And for context, I mean, when I was in Lexington, I was keeping a list at every position, including like reliever, starter, lefty, righty, of 10 available guys I at least had some email communication with. And my like rule for myself was minimum three of them have to be up in the Northeast in case we're out that way. Minimum three of them have to be in the Kentucky, like Ohio Valley area. I mean, that's basically 140 guys just on a list of feeling like half of them would be ready to go at a moment. That's something that is a pain to maintain because you also have to keep track of who of them gets signed randomly and whatever else situations are. So you got to, kind of follow up and touch base with people. But that is why it's nice to have somebody dedicated to doing that. And I think it's unfair to expect coaches who are spending how many hours a day, or not a day, but like how many hours a month on buses. And then when the long nights are done to sit back down when they get to their apartment and check that again, like check the transaction logs and all that. Send some emails. That sucks. So that's why I always advocate for a baseball ops person. But I don't know, just giving that for context of what that should probably look like. Not to, wow,
Yeah.
that was very self-promoting. Sorry, that
No,
was not
no.
what I meant to do.
I,
But I was just trying to give a context of like
no,
it's a lot of emails. It's
you no,
not
you
fun.
bring up a good point because last year I had Lamar on and I talked to him for about a good hour and he was like, I have a window from here to here and you have to hit that window. And in the meantime, I'm talking with him, I'm asking a question, and his eyes are off the side, scrolling through emails of scouts and players. And I mean, this was in what, late February, early March.
Yeah.
So the roster wasn't fully, prepared yet. So the question that I want to lead into is, I don't know a baseball ops role, in your case or whoever case wants more of a paid position. But
Mhm.
let's just put in perspective that if Gary's not bringing in enough to have a paid position, would a baseball ops role be suitable as an intern role?
I mean, other teams make it work. You need a couple guys,
Okay.
but I mean, off the top of my head, I mean, Joliet was running a really successful baseball ops intern program.
Yeah.
There's a couple Frontier League teams that really work it.
Yeah. Who's the one that we had on that stars an intern and got moved up?
Was it Jack?
Well, Jack was one of them,
Oh
but I
no,
think there's one other.
yeah, Windy City.
Was it when you say it was it Lake Country or not Lake Country, Lake Erie?
Damn it.
I
Could
remember
be
because we
both.
had a couple of these people on. Oh
Yeah.
God, I'm offending
I
like
thought it was
several
Windy
people right
City.
now.
I thought it
It's
was
tough.
Windy City.
Okay, now I got to
I thought it was Windy
shamelessly
City,
go
but
to
I
my
think it
website
could
and check
also be
this.
like Erie. In the meantime, I'll say this: it doesn't take now. If it's one thing, if it's doing the communication to set the process up. The other thing that drives me nuts about Gary is there are obvious things that have to happen here, and there's an obvious type of player that needs to be focused on here. I mean, you can't be in the bottom two of on base percentage 3 years in a row. That's wild. I mean, that is crazy. You outside, if you take out the teams, because I just did the deep dive on park factors because I hate myself. If you take out the teams that
Thanks,
are
Chris.
elevation based, yeah, there's only like 5 or 6 teams in indie ball with bigger fields than Gary. Don't like if you're not getting top talent, don't even bother with home run hitters right now. Like
Mm.
establish guys who are going to get on base. Stolen bases are your friend. Try to turn singles into doubles by stealing bags. That's the place to start. And if nothing else, to apply pressure on the pitcher and see if they make mistakes, which will turn some non-power hitters into power hitters if they run into them. Like it doesn't. An intern will tell them that, and I just it concerns me to see this continuing. Look, we kind of clowned on Lexington last year when what's his face got picked up. Can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. And when he was like asked at like the press conference what his plan was, he was like
Oh, Greg Zahn.
high
Zahn, yeah,
velocity guys, and I was like,
reloads.
in Lexington, dude, if you the velocity guys that are left are because they haven't hit the zone in years, or they're just not velocity guys, and you're just going to have guys taking them deep in that little ballpark, and they
But
went for
Ryan,
it. It was a train
the
wreck.
Manalytics,
I know,
the
but
Manalytics said he was good.
it's leaning in. I understand the leaning into the power thing and what the modern analytics would say on it, but in the very specific situation Gary has, whether it's based on how hard it can be to recruit and how the field is and how it plays, like there's a type of guy that Gary should be leaning toward.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not saying if you get a bunch of these dudes, your team's going to be a playoff team. I'm saying it gets you competitive. It gets some run support where maybe some more pitchers might even want to show up. Like it's
You get
that's a piece one.
you get uh, a guy that can make contact and get on base,
Hmm.
guy that has speed that he can steal, right?
Hmm.
Turn those singles into doubles. Your power hitters should be left-handed hitters,
Hmm.
and you don't need a lot of those.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's your formula. If you've got guys that can make contact, get on first, the high on base percentage guys and
Mhm.
and and fast that can
Mhm.
steal, you're fine. Um, one of the problems you mentioned uh stolen bases have gone down
Mhm.
Yeah.
year before to last year. Um, we had the guy who led our team in stolen bases all of a sudden became more powerful. He worked on his swing and became more powerful. And instead of hitting it just outside the infield and going at and getting on base, he started hitting it to the outfielders and getting flyouts. So one of our best players for getting on base and stealing bases was getting flyouts, line drives to the outfield outs.
Sounds like he needs the major league treatment of every time I see the ball in the air, you owe me 10 push-ups.
But they
Yeah.
weren't pop outs. They were,
Yeah.
Okay,
they were
they're
line drives. But
okay.
instead of line drives right over the infield and getting that, single or double, he's hitting
Okay.
line drives right to the fielder. And it's like no matter what you do, there's a fielder there now. Well, it's because you
Yeah.
got a little bit more power, you know.
Uh, okay.
But that was our thing last year was that it seemed like when we would hit the ball, it was to players. We couldn't get on base. We couldn't steal a base. That was it. We just couldn't get on base.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, the on base percentage numbers are staggering. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen, I don't know, I'm sure I have, but to see a team where there's not a single batter that set foot in the box last year for Gary that was league average in on base percentage.
No.
That just doesn't fly. Like,
And
Yeah.
And
and
I
Mm.
I,
and
I
we need to
think
be more selective in our swings. That was the
Yeah.
other thing. Is
I
that
Yeah.
we're not going six, seven, eight pitches into an at bat.
Yeah.
We're, hey, we got three balls on us. Let's swing at the next three pitches. That's the way that it seemed like the mentality was. We don't want to take the walk.
it,
Yeah, they were like
it,
70 walks behind the next worst team at walking.
Yeah. That was
It's a
bad.
clear picture. Sorry, go ahead.
but I think the issue was to that is how many games were already out of hand by halfway through the game. So
Mm,
you're already taking a team that may not be suitable for scoring a lot of runs in the first place, and then you give up a lot of runs on via walks or hits and mostly walks. But now you're behind the eight ball. So instead of you taking two or three good pitches, you're already swinging for the fences because you're down by 5 or 6 runs with 3 innings left.
That was
that's true. And that goes, I mean, I feel like the pitching situation flies under the radar because the hitting was such a tough look last year. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even. I feel
I
bad. It
Yeah.
feels like a cop out say I don't even know where to begin with the pitching, but it's more of a.
well, but
Yeah.
you're not wrong because you guys said it last year before. I think in your preview, you guys said I don't know who their starting pitch, what their starting rotation is going to look like.
Yeah.
I mean, the only one really last year that I could have said, yeah, was going to be in that starting rotation was Chris Irwin because he's been there, he's done it, but he was also
Mhm.
coming off an arm injury, so you couldn't uh, necessarily put him in
You
that
can't
number
count
one
on him
role.
to be able to
And
throw those innings.
it seemed like a lot of players that he brought in that are pitchers have some kind of arm injury. Franklin Perez had that whole shoulder reconstruction surgery. Even Grant Umberger, who signed with the RailCats and then signed with the White Sox, he was coming off an arm injury. So I don't know if it's a lot of those like he doesn't have a feel for pitchers and just like guy seems to be going good. He had an arm injury, but we can see what he can do for us. So I don't know necessarily what the issue. I mean, I know what the issue is. We get a lot of guys that can throw hard, but they have no idea where to hit the strike zone.
Yeah.
And we keep those
Yeah.
guys longer than they need to.
Oh, there,
And
there was a game last year. I think it was last. Yeah, I think it was last year, where we had a pitcher that I swear to God he threw 98 miles an hour, right? And the ball gets hit back to him, and he unknowingly rifles that ball to first base. Had no reason to do it, but rifles it to the first baseman, who luckily had his glove where the ball was going to go, or he never would have caught it. And pulled his hand out of his glove and was shaking his hand and shaking his head. And the pitcher was looking at him like, I don't know why I did that.
Just like instinctively, like must throw hard.
Must throw hard, right? And we've had pitchers that could throw really hard. And the whole time I'm saying to myself, don't kill anybody. Please don't kill anybody. Because they didn't throw in the strike zone.
Hmm. Which, just to backtrack for 1 second here, when I was going through guys we had on that kind of built their analytics department and then moved up the chain. The guy I was originally thinking of from Lake Erie was Nathaniel Asher. Sorry, man, forgot your name there. The reason I originally said Lake Country was because we had Jack Jennings on, who was,
Mhm.
running Lake Country. Again, apologies there. And I believe, Ryan, you were referring to Jack Kelly, who has
Yes.
the Frontier League site, which you don't get an apology. We referenced you. You were appropriate.
I will pop in here, by the way, Chuck. You were not crazy that the ball was just finding fielders last year. I mean, I don't have like team by team numbers, but the batted ball in play for uh
Just
the batted ball in play average for Gary was, I mean, a 288, and the league average was 316. So that's a huge difference. That's kind of wild.
did,
Um,
did you
I don't
just
even.
bring devil numbers into the show?
I did.
We've
But
talked about this with the analytics. Get it
to
out
be
of here.
fair, I just had to do my math on the fly here, like, so I didn't show up ready. He brought it up, it's not on me.
I did.
Oh,
I
And
boy,
did.
just had to do math on
of
the fly. Yeah,
the
take your
one, two,
numbers elsewhere.
three, I got 11 qualified hitters from Gary here on my list. 10 of them had a batted ball in play below league average. Does that mean they're making bad contact? That's possible. But some of these numbers are kind of wild. I mean, Del Val, however you want to go about
Del
that.
Valle.
So if
Del, that's it. That's
Yeah.
right. I got a
we know who
message
watched
about
the
that at one point
Winnipeg
'cause I didn't
broadcast.
get that one.
Yes.
I didn't get that one right,
Trev.
and somebody messaged me. I was like, okay, I'll check the pronunciation, check in on it. I was like, you know what? That's going to be what that's going to be. All right. He somehow had a 258 batted ball and play average. Like, that's insane. That, I mean, that is 60 points below league average. So you got to figure realistically, some of this sure is out of their hand. This does not justify things, but I'm saying there was a bit of bad break to it. Though I do think some of it might be guys having to swing maybe for the fence more, putting the ball in the air more. Could be guys just, again, I said, making bad contact, so guys have time to get to the ball. The only person who outperformed was actually Contreras, who had a 343 BABIP. So that's fascinating as well.
And he's one of those guys that when he hit the ball, I don't think that he got out. He was one of those guys that seemed like he always made good contact when he made contact.
The numbers back that up. So the eye test works. But yeah, other than that, it's kind of it's bleak on that. I don't really know. I don't know if I've ever seen a team across the board have such a bad.
Amazing that I know these things and I don't even know what batted ball and play means.
It's
not
almost
important.
like
It's
it's
devil
just finding
magic.
fancy.
No,
I almost
no,
I
listen.
halftime think analytics is just fancy numbers to like justify the eye test.
This
That-
this
like-
this book's great. This book helped me a lot learn analytics right here.
There you go.
Is it going to
So,
help you
fine.
get some extra sleep too?
No,
Is it-
I'm
is that
running
a-
on no.
Is that a book?
Yeah, it's a book.
Okay, I put that right next to the podcast that I watch.
When it comes to, we kind of touched on it. When it comes to the pitching, I mean, how many guys got starts last year is what I'm curious about. One, two,
I
three,
have
four,
baseball
five.
reference.
They
up.
really did have a solid rotation.
Yeah,
by the way.
that's the
Not
thing.
hold on. Hold on. Let me quantify that. A consistent rotation.
Yes.
Yes.
I did not mean to say they were solid. I mean,
Sanabria splitting
Irwin
time
had
is interesting.
moments. Yeah, Sanabria probably. I don't know how many
He,
Not
Sanabria.
outings he should have had.
Perez both split. They either started or they were
yeah,
relievers for about half the season each.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm. I, that's honestly when we did projections, I would have assumed they would have had probably like 15 different guys take starts. So the fact that it was only 10 is kind of wild.
well,
I mean, what?
I mean, one had 3 innings start here too. So Hunter Tracy, I mean, like he's a spot starter,
yeah,
almost an
well, he
opener,
was one of
really.
those guys that came in towards later the year or was a replacement player. But
Yeah.
realistically, what kind of threw a kink in that system was Daniel Alvaro, who got signed by the Mexican League early on. Like
Okay.
he
Yeah.
only played 4 games and started in 3, and he was up and gone.
Right. And that's one of those examples though where I say like we have to have a serious conversation about the ability to pivot and where the
Mhm.
issue is coming from because Charleston got gutted that way. York kind of got gutted that way.
Well, Charleston got hit
We
bad
don't,
that way.
And
we
Yeah.
don't pivot at all.
Gastonia always does. High Point does. And then second half they had it all back together and were ready to make a run. And you know, Gary only loses one or two guys. The fact that they really can't recover throughout the year is where I
Our, our,
continue to be
our,
like, what's
our,
going on?
our
Yeah.
problem wasn't that we lost one or two guys. Our problem was that we couldn't pivot at all. Whether
Mm.
it was the team struggling and we need to make a change for this or that, or, it seemed like, okay, what if I say we were in a constant pivot and that in itself was not a pivot? Because we would have a great game in a lot with a lineup, and then the next game we totally change the lineup
Mhm.
and expect the same outcome. And it's like, okay, that didn't work. Go back to the first one. No, we go to a third lineup that is totally different than the first two. And it seemed like it was constant like that, that it was a constant either we're playing the numbers, we're playing the analytics, we're playing something, but we're not realizing that, hey, we had a lineup that was working. Let's stick with it. Let's tweak it, but we don't need to make full changes. And it seemed like that's another thing that we were doing. Keeping the same guys, we should have been changing some guys up. Instead, we were just moving a lineup around.
Big fan of keeping the lineup consistent, but don't get me
Yeah.
on that soapbox. Yeah, it almost is like tinkering with the wrong stuff when maybe other things should be in the focus. With I don't know. I don't want to move on too soon. I also am, very aware of how long we're going to make your pod run here, but I'm I at some point want to discuss kind of what's been done in the 2025. We don't need to do it now, but I'm just putting it out there to the world because
Let's do it.
That was going to be leading into that next question because I
hey,
mean
go team.
eh, realistically, we've kind of gone through what we think about the past couple seasons and what may not be working. We went through the whole baseball operations part of it, blah blah blah, this and that. But the current roster has been something that is completely different than it has been in years past with Lamar because Lamar was right out of the gate. You got all these guys in affiliate ball, or whatever the case may, they have some kind of higher echelon, and now it's more of a handful of people coming out where it's just out of college. They don't have any independent baseball experience in general. Now we're getting a couple more of those that are coming in that has some kind of affiliate experience, but most of them right now are players that don't have even independent ball experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of wondering if you guys had any more insight on that because I was like, is there a budget issue? I
I
It
mean,
but
does feel kind of
I can't
budgety.
find a
I think
justification for a lot of the moves being made here.
is that a result of the past 4 years? Because you come in,
Um,
you get Greg's guys, try to get out of his guys. You bring your own guys in.
Mhm.
Realistically, he came in year one, really wasn't a full year one. His full year one was actually in year two because he came in March, so he didn't really
yeah,
have anything to work with. So realistically, it's maybe
yeah,
year four, but it's really year three for him in full. But it's okay. I know this guy from the Astros time. He reached AAA. He reached AA. Uh, or you got this guy because you know this guy and that guy. You're bringing all these people in that have been drafted high or been drafted in general. Now it's like none of that's seeming to work. So do we fill in some pieces early on that might be able to compete for a role and maybe show something that they have to change a little bit? Because in the years past, you bring in those guys that should be helping you and they weren't helping you. So I don't know if it's like a free rush or a refresh of
Strategy.
strategy.
Or are you've made changes the first year, you made changes the second year. The second year didn't necessarily pan out. Actually, it was a debacle. So now you're being told, hey, it worked for Taggart, it should work for you.
I
Is
don't
that
think
what you,
that's the case.
I
I
mean,
don't
I'm
because if you're gonna
uh,
base it off of that, you
I'm
just
just
take
saying.
the 1 year that Greg went back into the American Association,
yeah, it didn't go well.
took a team that
A
was
good Winnipeg
competing
team.
a good Winnipeg team in the playoffs,
Yeah.
and they missed it, and they were terrible.
Mm.
I know. I'm just saying maybe that's what was being said. I don't know.
I mean, the thing that I get a little hung up with is this is the first full year with new ownership, is it not? And
Yes.
second full or first full? Because I know
First
Joe
one.
bought the team, but I thought he did it like right before the start of the season.
Yep.
Okay. So this is really like
This
the full one where he has to lay the land. Okay.
yeah.
I do, and I don't have enough on it, so maybe I'm just pulling it out of thin air here, but I do to a certain degree wonder if it's all right, we're gonna shift from money on field to money off the field, making a more enjoyable fan experience to get more people in, and then we'll go from there and try to just readjust it because we tried the money on field angle, didn't yield that great of a result. And I know Ryan, you'll agree with me on this, which is having a winning team doesn't necessarily put more people in the stands there. So I wonder if that's a certain degree. And we complimented Hagerstown a lot, where they said, look, it wasn't a great year on the field this past season. There was a lot of not great baseball being played there, but it felt like they got their organization off the ground and running, got a good reputation, wonderful new ballpark, and they got people in there. So now in year two, we'll address the on the field thing. Obviously, it's not a one for one, different league off the hop. And then, secondly, one's a brand new organization, the other one's been established for some time. But that wouldn't stun me if we're trying to do that angle. It could also just simply be we're starting off with guys that we can sign, and we'll go into camp with as many contracts as we can, and then we'll whittle down from there. And at least we get to see some younger guys and see, hey, we have a 23-year-old here, we have a 22-year-old here, we have plenty of younger guys. So that way, if they don't work out this year, we're familiar with them. Maybe we try to send them off to the Pioneer League or Frontier League. Then we get a little season there, and then we bring them back and we build up a good back and forth relationship. We go ahead and, I know it's about three or so 01 birthdays on the pitching staff here, although I think they're all returners. If it doesn't work out, you could go ahead and say, hey, man, we're going to move you to, say, I don't know, let's just pick a Frontier League team, Schaumburg, for example. We'll move you to there. We're going to trade you for future considerations. We'll bring you back in a little bit
We're gonna send
and
you.
kind of go through that.
We're gonna send you to Mississippi.
Hey, that's actually
honestly,
the
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
that's the one
probably
for
more.
And
one there.
I,
There
I,
is enough there.
I'll tell you this. So
Yeah.
Joe told us the exact opposite of that.
Okay.
Joe told us that,
Okay.
hey, uh, the past last year, which was Joe's
Hmm.
first full year doing it, was the
Yeah.
focus was on operations, the focus was on the fan experience, and
Okay.
then this year the focus was going to be the on-field product.
Okay.
I don't know if it was fully. He said that he was going to address it in the off season as far as having a conversation with Lamar to see how they're going to go
Okay.
forward. But I still think the on or the off the field as we've discussed in length multiple times,
Promotions. Oh wait, no.
is probably more important
Yes.
than what the actual product on the field is going to be. Because
Yeah.
yes, you have one good promotion like a union night, it
Hmm.
fills the stadium.
Yeah.
The
It's a
team
big
could
Why?
lose by
moneymaker.
Okay.
they could lose by 20 and they're not going to care.
Yeah.
I want to know this from you guys. So
Okay.
what's the big thing with Union Night? Why does it surprise you, or why does it not
It
surprise you that we had a
Yeah.
Union Night in Northwest Indiana?
it
Oh,
it
it
doesn't
doesn't.
surprise
Yeah.
us. It's just like if it's so it fits so well, and we're just like because the thing was it was more of like an in the moment type thing where we were scrolling,
Yeah.
we were
They
doing some sort
posted
of
a
attendance
sellout,
dive.
and we were like,
Yeah,
"What's
and we are
going
like
on with that?"
that. Yeah, and then we looked up and we're like, was it
It's
like it's a Friday
U.S.
night game or something?
Steel Yard. I
Yeah,
mean, it's U.S. Steel Yard. It's
yeah,
U.S. Steel. They have one of the largest unions in America.
yeah. We were just like, I forget why we were on the attendance topic. It may have been that we saw the Twitter post, or we may was it on when we were going through the knockout attendance and we were like, BS. There's no way there was 1,000 people in that stadium. We know there wasn't, and we were digging through that, and we were like making an example, and then we saw like an outlier number. Like, wait, what? They're averaging like 1,400 a game.
Yeah.
Why is
I
this
had to
like
know.
twice
So I
that?
checked the promo schedule. That's right. I
Mhm.
remember now.
Yeah,
And it was Union Night. And we're like, hell yeah, Gary. But we were hype
yeah,
about it because it was like,
yeah.
no, like, no, yeah, obviously know your market. Like, I was excited
That was the
because
whole conversation, actually.
outspoken
Mhm.
supporter of the organization. I want Gary to do well. I was
Yeah.
like, hell yeah. Like they
I need to
saw
find
they
which episode
know
that
it
was.
and
Oh,
it
I
went
would say
well.
that
Yeah.
it was a wonderful day to be at the stadium that day.
I imagine that a full ballpark is an atmosphere on itself that
Mhm.
just enhances everything.
Well, I've been to a sold out game in Chicago.
Okay.
Um, didn't really like it.
Okay.
Been to a sold out game in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That one was better.
Okay.
Um, Sold out game in Gary. Nothing I've seen compares to it yet. And I think that what it is, in Chicago, you can
Yeah.
have a sold out crowd, but they're not really watching the game very much.
Mm,
Yeah.
And they're not really into it. I mean, there's some diehard guys that are into it, but in Milwaukee, you had more people that were there for the game,
Yeah.
and it was like okay. But in Gary, oh man, those guys are loud. When you
Yeah.
get people there, they're loud.
Well, you got to put it in a little perspective though. Chicago, yeah, I understand that Gary is 45, 30 minutes away from
But
actual
it's its own
Chicago.
market.
It's its own market.
Yes.
And Milwaukee, you have the Brewers, so you already have a fan base there. So they're just going to a game because one, the Brewers couldn't be playing, and they're like, oh, let's just go do something uh, cheap and go enjoy some baseball. And the same thing with Chicago. I mean, you're just gonna have people going there just because they can. I mean, it's right there off the expressway. You got O'Hare, you got Dave and Buster's right there. You got the
You've
mall.
got you've got people going to Chicago because their company got sold on some tickets, and hey, we got
Yeah.
20 tickets. You want to go to a game? That's why free beer. Okay, we're there.
So my next question here, I don't know if you guys have the current roster pulled up and
I
how
do
much
have it.
you've actually like kind of paid attention to the signings,
Okay.
but when you're looking at the current roster, is there a player or some players on here that jump out at you for a good reason?
Well, Andres Diaz is a guy that's intriguing to me. Young guy, had some success. I like him going through box scores and whatnot from last year. He seemed to have kind of hit or miss type of days. So, from a young pitcher, I'm perfectly cool with that. This is a high level for a guy that was, what, 22 for half of
Hmm.
the season, 23 for the rest of the season. I'm perfectly cool with that. I think he definitely could turn to something. And Peyton Lung's another guy that I think can play really well in the ballpark that he calls home. I'd like to see a little less hard contact. The one start I saw from him, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of stuff that's going to the deep outfield. Don't know if I love that, but
mm.
outside of that, again, younger pitcher. Well, I call him younger because he's born the same year as I am, so it makes me feel better. But still, I like him a lot. I think there's a lot there. And I will just mention Villar. I don't know much about him, but I do know he's from West Orange, which is
Hmm.
down the road from me. So I'm rooting for him for that sole reason alone. And he liked the tweet that I sent that said that much. So go team.
Yeah, the one thing with Anders was he
Yeah.
started the year in the bullpen.
Okay.
And then I don't think looking at like all of his numbers, like he didn't pitch more than like 20 innings in a season.
That's what I recall too, that this was a
And
astoundingly high amount of usage for him to start it.
he started the year really hot. He won
Yeah.
player pitcher of the week, all that, and then he kind of slowed down. I think it was just the fatigue
Yeah,
aspect
that's pretty
that kind of
fair.
got at him. The thing
Yeah.
about Peyton when we first got him last year, he came from the
Yeah.
Pioneer League. The one thing I was
Okay.
impressed was his numbers in the home run department. He didn't give up a lot of
Okay.
home runs, and especially
Okay.
in the Pioneer League is
Yeah,
pretty
it's
impressive.
home run
I
hitter empire. Yeah,
and
environment.
it was when he came in this year, it was kind of surprising how hard he was being hit. Now, I don't know if that's just based on the talent between the two leagues, but I mean,
Mm,
he has good stuff. He's there. He just
yeah.
has to be more consistent. And I
Yeah.
think having a consistent battering mate behind the plate will help him. I know we just signed Cooper Edwards, and
Yeah.
yes, his offensive numbers don't jump out at you. His size doesn't
Yes.
jump out at you, but there was a span where when they were together, it was about a month span, I think like 3 or 4 starts where the ERA was like 1.
Okay. That's encouraging. So it's kind of like a Josh Tolley or a Dickey type situation almost here, where he just pitches a lot better with him there. I will also say in favor of Long here, higher level of competition, ERA did drop by about half a point, like that a lot through about 14 more innings and more like
Mhm.
13, but we'll call it 14, sounds better. That's encouraging. Only four more hits, only four more runs, of which only three more were earned. So that's not bad. Home runs did go up, like you mentioned. We can fix that, not a problem. The biggest thing I like here, to be quite honest, is the walks drop down.
Mhm.
Drop down significantly. I mean, we're talking like 14 walks less. That's a very encouraging sign. That's the kind of pitcher I like here. Now, I'd be okay with the walks going up a bit if we could go ahead and, you know, work a guy better. If you're working around a guy and not risking, the home runs, essentially what I'm trying to say is I would trade the walks for fewer home runs. If that's the situation here, I can live with it. But even still, there's a lot there that's encouraging. I do think he's one of the two guys that really, really jump out at me, at least pitching wise, that are coming back.
Ryan, you got anything?
Uh-oh.
I genuinely love the optimism. I'm
He
this I
ran
was kind of
numbers.
dreading
Oh
this.
no.
Yeah, I did.
I told you
Um
those numbers are no good for you.
I've I've also talked with a couple other people within the league just to be like, am I missing anything? Um Choosing carefully how to go about it. It's a lot of guys of the what, it's 15-ish officially rostered guys at this point.
Not
Yeah,
bad, yeah.
math is so hard, but 15 was about right. 14, sure. Uh, Essentially, a lot of them, the majority are guys who do belong on American Association rosters. There's just a lot of the general take is these are guys who you add late. Like these are the pieces you add at the end. And it's odd to sort of start these as the building blocks, even with the returners. I get the Peyton Long thing. I see potentially the strategy going on here with the pitchers. Yeah, they're guys who are letting people on base at an alarming clip, but they're not laying the ball out of the yard, which is interesting. It's one of the better home run per nine like pitching staffs that have been assembled so far among the league. So that's cool. The concern, of course, is that on average they're letting on about two. They're projected to be giving up about two base runners per inning. But if the ball is kept in the yard, well, might be able to work it. The other issue is that there are not a lot of strikeouts going on there, which if you're letting guys on, you're going to want to strike people out. If you're not striking people out, you're going to want to maybe keep them off base, but keeping the ball in the yard again could help out there. Uh, it's just there's a lot of question. There's a lot of there's a lot of optimism needed here. And now, okay, that is from a take of if you're trying to win ball games right now.
Mhm.
If you're trying to build something, I can get on board. Like if this is, I struggle to believe they are trying to build right now because Lamar is on year 4, year 3, 4, whatever. Of this isn't the time you want to be building. It's time you want results. But if he's feeling like he can do a build right now, then this isn't the worst starting ground. And it goes back to my theory on like roster construction in this situation, which is again, focus on your guys that you think you can get signed, high potential guys with maybe a lower floor that you can move on from quickly if you need. Hopefully you can find them a landing spot so you keep a good reputation for, being a spot that people want to go to. And then, anybody who doesn't get signed but turns out well, you keep them and build with that. My issue just keeps coming back to yes, that can work, but I just don't necessarily see, I don't know. I'm trying to find the right words for it. It's
You're making me think that it's like, all right, yes, you can get to Texas by traveling through China, but do you really want to do that when there's a lot easier way?
yeah,
That's
it's a
kind
little bit of that. It is a little bit of that. Uh, and as I said, like I can see the plot on the pitching right now, and I can see that if they can add, let's say they're probably going to add 7 more pitchers to this, maybe 6. If 3 or 4 of them are league average and can run some innings, like we're having a conversation now, at least a competitive pitching staff on most nights, which is fine. But then that transitions to the other problem, which is this lineup. I don't know. LG Castillo, I get, but he looks like a 260 hitter, and everyone else is hitting like averages out to like 200
of
hitters. Is yeah.
yeah.
And that's not going to float the pitching situation, and it's not going to help it. And they're going to start to exacerbate each other, and that's what I'm concerned about. Because you're going to get, and you've seen these games plenty. I've seen these games plenty. The one where it so quickly rolls out of control on you, where the hitting gets a slow start, pitching gets a bad start, and now you're trying to take big chops out of the tree with an axe that's just not made for that with your lineup. And I worry about how many games, and after a couple of years of seeing that, it concerns me that it seems like we're kind of going that way again. And I would almost like just the full lean into dudes who can't even pretend to hit for power, but just kind of get on base, like almost at like a, a rate and a style that other teams wouldn't even find appealing. Like get weird,
Mhm.
moneyball it a little bit, because I think that's maybe that's just is at least a cohesive direction. Like, and there's gonna be nights where it's like this lineup's gonna suck, but there's gonna be other nights where it's like, hey, we're getting on base, things are coming together, and we're doing well. I think
Would
the number of nights where it's
yeah.
going to come together right now on both pitching and offense is so low that I'm trying to think who else they're going to bring into this that's going to float it.
Would you say
Sorry,
trying to
I don't
take
know how else to
well,
say that.
would you say trying to take like that Gastonia approach they had, I think it was 22 or 23, where it was a bunch of get on base and steal base type guys is the way to go on this one?
I think there's
Mhm.
something to it. I also think that Gastonia had a much higher, not necessarily even quality, but just the level. Of course, they had higher level guys coming in. It's the Atlantic League, but
Yeah.
there
They
was
also weren't being paid, but
right. Get on base and move was a good call there.
yeah,
They had
because
the
it
highest on
feels
base
like a little,
percentage and the highest stolen bases. Now it's a lot. We're not asking them to get the highest on base
Oh,
percentage. That's crazy. Like
the
you're not going to do it after what they've been doing. But
yeah.
to pursue getting close to league average here, and again, right now, I think this is worse than last year.
the when you've got guys that are putting 2 guys on base in an inning, you kind of
Mhm.
wish you were going up against pitchers that were like that because that's what you need. Is you need to
Right.
go up against pitchers that are giving up 2 hits an inning
Mhm.
or giving up 2 runners an inning, especially if you're playing small ball, right?
Yes.
Because you can stretch that into a guy on first and third, and then next thing you know, you're getting a guy in, and you're
Yep.
running 1, 2, 3 runs an inning for 9 innings. But if you're having a pitcher that's given up to, you're shooting yourself in the foot every game, which is essentially what you're saying, because you
Mhm.
can't overcome that. You're giving
Mhm.
up, but you need that other team to give up every single inning, you know.
Yeah.
But that being said, um, last year I think we started out with some of the best infield double plays on a regular basis, got out of some tough jams on a regular basis, and it was like, wow, we're really good defensively. But then you take that step back and say, why does this have to happen every inning? Because it felt like every inning we got two guys on and we have to try to get a double play. I mean,
Mhm.
it was just absolutely ridiculous like that. So bringing in a Peyton, I think he's got a lot more upside. I think that it was him coming into the American Association, him getting his feet wet, and really, hey, these are the things you need to work on. Do the off season, come back having worked on them. And then with Diaz, you've got a guy that he was new, and you bring him in, and I would say he had some really good high marks, but he got tired. And this is where
Mhm.
one of those things where I think that you have to pivot. And when you see that you've got a guy that's, hey, this guy can't go the innings, we need to make some changes. And instead, we just kept throwing him out there for more innings.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's where you also start to run into concerns with guys not wanting to come to the team after that, because guys talk and guys see that. Even if you're an opponent and you can just see a guy's cooked and he's still out there, and you'll see him 1 week and you're like, man, this guy's got much left. And you see him 2 weeks later and they're still riding him out there. Those are the kind of things that get guys talking. Yeah, and that's part of the issue is I think that everyone they sign, there is sort of an angle where I'm like, okay, I see it. There is not a single guy in this group where I'm like, are we high? I think there's
There was
parts where I'm
one
like,
game that I was like
yeah.
that.
Well, there's parts where I'm like, all right, that's an optimistic way to view this, but I think I see what you're seeing. The issue is if there's one, the number of things have to go right to make things work out. And the number of times I feel like it's been shown that over the past couple of years, that's not been handled well. Like, it's not a great environment for fostering that kind of thing. If we're going the young guy route and trying to develop them and showcase them, that's one thing, but I don't think we've seen this to be a good environment for that. So I don't know. And I'm sorry that now I'm bringing more questions and answers to this party. I'm aware of that. We're talking about rebuilding things. So I'm like, I don't know. But I'm just looking at this roster, and it's hard for me because I'm like, this from here, this is not what I would have done with my first 14 spots if you gave me 1,000 times to do it. And I am there's limited options where they could go from here because it's not like they're gonna bring an MLB level talent suddenly like Long Island sometimes. Well, you're like Long Island looks bad this year, and then a week later you're like half their lineup's major leaguers. Okay, cool. That's just not, you know.
It is some of the issue that I think when you look at majority of the other teams and you start to recognize players that get picked up, there's not a lot of that with Gary. I mean, obviously there are Chris Irwin's been with the team going on 5 years. LG Castillo going in his fourth season with the RailCats,
Right.
but it just seems like there's a lot of turnover
Mm.
and a lot of optimism because no one has proven themselves in the league yet. Yeah, they may have been in affiliate rank or they may have been in the Frontier League or the Pioneer League, but there's nothing like American Association or like Atlantic League proof in a lot of their rosters.
Yeah.
Is that something that could be a part of the issue, or is that just me looking too far into that?
Um, Sorry, I'm recalibrating because I wasn't that I kind of anticipated where the question was going. It wasn't that direction. Um,
I do that.
No,
You
it's all
can.
good.
No, Ryan does this a lot on the show. I have to
Um,
cut it out a lot.
I'm
It's
like my
my
brain's like
plight.
I'm like, oh, I see where you're going here, and I'm kind of already thinking about like, oh, interesting, and then I'm like, oh, shoot, that was a different question. Um,
Yeah, we
hmm.
see why they told you to
What
give up the game.
want to answer on that one?
Well, it's God.
Well, I guess at this point, where do you think my question was going then? If that makes it a little bit easier.
Well, I was heading toward like I thought you were heading in the direction of like what is the angle toward this roster getting into that competitive spot.
Oh, I'm not that smart, so.
And now I'm kind of spinning on that one. I'm like, I don't know. Can you rephrase that question a little bit? I don't know. I'm trying to think. I feel like when I answer it incorrectly is my thing, and I'm just gonna be like,
It
these are words.
over the past 4 years, having
Yeah,
players that haven't proven themselves necessarily in the American Association, and you could say maybe even in
okay,
the
I
Atlantic
feel
League,
you.
but has that been a factor with the roster? Because you're playing the what if game. The what
Okay,
if is these numbers look really good, but who knows?
yeah, okay. So I feel you now. All right. So my thing is, if you're constructing a roster, I would say like your 7, 8, 9 maybe in the lineup. Your 4, 5 in the rotation, preferably just your five, I guess. A couple bullpen spots and a couple bench spots are for guys that are unproven. And it's like those are show me spots. You are comfortable going into every week saying my number five pitcher is probably going to pitch once, and there's a chance this is a disaster, and then we're gonna have to save it. You have some long relief guys or you have some low leverage guys that you put in and that didn't go well and now you have to use an extra pitcher and that sucks, but you had to give it the shot. The issue is we're finding, untested guys right now in this roster in spots that they don't belong. I mean, I've said it before, I'm a Ty Tiedemann truther. I like him. He's being put in spots on this pitching staff that he should not be in, unfortunately. And also it's preventing them from developing into that because once you have guys pitching in high leverage that shouldn't be, and you have like a young developing pitcher pitching high leverage who should not be pitching high leverage, now they can't really feel things out. It is like pressure on from pitch one. That guy's not necessarily developing in the best way for him. You're not going to get the max out of him, and that can be the same for batters. If you have a guy who's untested and he needs to grow into this a little bit, he's seeing this level of competition for the first time. It, he can. If he's batting eighth,
And you
it
put him
turn
in the
the
spot.
yeah. It's like if he's batting 7 or 8, it's like all right, maybe make sure you're flipping the lineup when you need to. But for the most part, you're feeling it out. There's no pressure. If he's batting like fifth or something, and he's like something the protection for like one of your two main hitters, it's not putting him in good positions, and it, that isn't a good position to develop in either. And I think that's why also they're not getting. I think some of the guys that don't give young players who don't give results for Gary right now are because they're not the quality of player is going to give a good result. But I think you've probably had some guys over time, and I can't pull them off the top of my head, that have not had the opportunity to become that piece moving forward. Like having, LG and I'm gonna miss it. Irwin. That's huge. That's great. Long-term pieces like that. But at this point, you should be hoping for more of those. And I hate to see a roster doesn't look like it's made to develop those guys.
I
Like I've said this over and over again that you've got when you're putting a guy that should be hitting, number two or number one, and you've got him batting ninth, and you've got a guy who should be batting eighth or ninth, batting fourth and fifth. It's like you're setting these people up to fail from the start. And then what happens is everybody else starts to fail. It seemed like that was kind of a recurring theme
Mhm.
is that, uh, same thing with the pitching. You could put a pitcher out there, but when you're bringing the same three guys in every single game, you're not doing anything for anybody.
Mhm.
and you're
Yeah.
not, in game 40, in game 40, they've already been in 30 of the 40 games, 35 of the 40 games. You're not doing anything for anybody.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just take Josh Smith and Nate Alexander. I think they both hit like 50 games played or 48, 49 that are around that, and they're relief pitchers.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And
Yeah.
I mean, Nate and Josh both made the All-Star game, respectively so, and I believe they both signed. I don't know if they signed Mexican League contracts, but I know they're still playing at the
Mhm.
moment, and it's well deserved on their front of it. But like, it was Yohan Valdez, it was Nate Alexander, and it was
Mhm.
Josh Smith. And I mean, that was the three main pitchers that were able to shut it down. And towards the end of the year, the numbers started to slip because they were
Well,
being overused.
Even Pinto and Hull threw a
I was
ton of
gonna
innings.
say
If you look at
Pinto
it, you
too.
can see there's basically 6 dudes that they could go to, and I'm sure they didn't all overlap, and it just was like we're just gonna keep going back to that well.
Well, a lot of the games that they were quote unquote winning or tied at, the tight games, that's when you would see Valdez,
Mm,
Alexander, and Smith.
yeah. Mm,
Yeah.
or one of those three would be struggling, so they'd put in somebody else that was normally one of the guys you'd put in when you were losing, and now
yeah.
you've got high numbers on that guy.
That's a lot of
Right.
like Hall and Grimm and all. They
Yeah.
were the inning eaters. Like they just came in to
Okay.
eat innings.
Yeah. But I'm a
Hall's a
Denson Hall
dude.
fan.
Yeah, Denson's a dude. I'm surprised he didn't get a look as a starter because
Mm.
he did that in the Atlantic League for a little bit.
He is a guy, if I remember. Here's a guy as I get into my
Now this is
college
a
work.
guy.
If and I could be off, but I'm fairly certain he had some pretty aggressive splits between as a starter
Okay.
and as a reliever. I think the numbers
Fair.
strongly suggest you should like he had a couple years that are basically wasted years looking back where he had like a ERA in the sevens, where if you just used him as a reliever, his ERA was like in the fours, and you're like, damn, what could have been?
He had to
Uh,
do a little self-correction during the course of the season because I'm pretty sure he set up a garbage can in the batter's box, and he would throw it at to prevent from hitting batters.
Oh,
Yeah,
He
is
would
he
hit,
hitting dudes?
yeah.
Oh, man, he hit a
nice.
lot of guys. What a dog. You dog. He was hitting one every like 3 innings. It's crazy.
yeah.
Yeah,
Denson.
yeah.
Putting dents in him, am I right?
11 hit by. Oh my
We
gosh.
had we had a lot of
Yeah.
hit batters last year.
Mhm.
I bet you we probably led the league. We might have
Yeah,
doubled the
I
rest
could
of the
tell you
league.
that in a second. Hold on, let me pull it up.
A full
Yeah, it says
Nile Ball
80.
performance.
Niall Ball is a dude, man. He gets kicked around Indy ball for a while. Fargo Moorhead Red Hawk this
He's
past
a
year,
wild boy.
and he's a
80 hit batters. You weren't even
yeah. I told you,
close to the
dude.
rest of the league. Good God.
Team stat. Hold on. Let's see here.
They were like, we're going to put up some runs on you. And Gary was like, not without
No.
some bruises, bud.
You'll get to first base, but you got to pay the
Oh,
toll first.
they weren't necessarily hard hits either. They were just we hit them. We hit them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well,
We
more
hit
than
'em.
anybody else.
Oh, we would have a game on the line, and we're bickering back and forth with the opposing team, and then all of a sudden we hit the batter, and it's like this isn't the time to hit a batter. It's just that our pitcher decided that he wanted to hit a batter that time, and we lose the game.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a mentality and control thing, too. That's a different, I don't know. I don't
I
even know where to
will-
go with that.
I will say this. I'm looking at the hit by pitch list. Gary's at the top with 80. Then everybody else, you have 68 through 59. Pretty much every other team's there. And then the two at the bottom are Sioux Falls with 49 and Winnipeg at 41. So it seems like if you keep it around the 60s, that's what's expected here.
Well, we
Yeah.
got a guy that apparently pitched 40 something innings or 40 something games, and he's hit a
Okay.
batter every game. We just picked up that guy.
I remember listening to
Hold
this
on.
during my workout, listening to the last episode there. There's
Hold
an
on.
interesting spin job about that, I will say.
Yes, so it's Viller. He's played in.
All
My
right.
boy, see, he's bringing some Jersey attitude to the
so
mound,
The
and you need that.
D3 kid, by the way.
So
just
all
beaning
if you
dudes.
take all of three through, obviously the summer ball doesn't get counted into Baseball Reference, but through his college and in the draft league, I believe, he has what 41 games or 49 games played, and he's hit 48 batters.
We have in I don't know. I'm looking at CSAC and Draft League. He has 19 starts and 25 hit batters.
Yeah, the draft.
What a dog.
My guy.
Yeah.
Pitched him Moose Jaw. Keystone guy, by the way.
Yep.
Wait,
There you
wait. Pitched in Medicine Hat?
Pitched him Moose Jaw.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry, buddy.
So,
I
so
gotta think about
maybe
Medicine
this
Hat.
guy that he throws so hard that when he hits a batter, the rest of them are like, I'm not swinging.
See?
Sure. Here's the funny thing. Okay, his walks weren't good in the CSAC, but in the Draft League, his hit batter rate was higher, but his walk rate was tiny.
So this leads to the question. We had this debate
The hell?
on
Sounds
last
like the crowd in the
podcast.
plate.
That's what I
Not
said.
anymore.
So at this point, would you rather walk a bunch? Would you rather want to walk a bunch of guys or just hit a bunch of guys? 'Cause I think it's
Hit
just
'em.
less pitch count. It's less
Oh,
Pitch
pitch
count
yeah.
down. Yeah, keep pitch count down. What are you talking about? This
I
is
mean,
the
like,
modern era. They're
Two-
pulling you at 90 pitches.
Here's the thing, like, there's a couple of advantages to hitting. A, pitch count. B, I still believe it's a mentality thing where you're like, oh, this dude's wild on the mound. I'm not, yeah, that's part of it. And the third part is he's not getting in the batter's box. Hit as many guys as you want. What are they going to do? Hit your
It's
other
the
guys?
DH era. We're fine.
Right, right.
I mean,
Exactly.
there was something. It was kind of an effectively wild thing throughout his whole Keystone career. It's
I mean, he
interesting.
Only
won.
rules has to work, buddy.
He won the
Mhm.
Conference Player of the Year. It was the United Shore, whatever it is.
Oh, yeah,
but
short league?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I did some research like these guys, right? And I
Yeah.
heard that he threatened to hit the guy that picked him. So
Oh,
he
for
said,
sure. You got to. You
I'm
got
gonna
to.
hit
It's
you unless
equal
you pick
opportunity.
Conference Player of the Year. And they said, okay, well, we'll do it. We'll do it.
See, yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know,
Jersey thinking.
Keystone
Like it.
Keystone is like a legitimate baseball school. Like I can
Yeah.
be like, oh, it's a D3 guy, but Keystone I would say is like
Nin-
well respected. They've had
19th straight conference wins.
Yeah.
yeah, they have like a long
By 80
track
belt
record.
represent.
They have some like serious major leaguers who have
Mhm.
come out of there too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christy Matheson's from there, by the way, if we're gonna go way back, but that was not the one I had in mind.
Yeah. I see Ryan's intently focusing in on something. Would you like to share with the class?
I just keep looking at free agents still. I'm still on the roster.
Let
Okay,
me tell you
uh,
about Brandon Dadson, who would be great on this team because he gets on base and,
It's
you know,
I'm
he
just
doesn't
saying
run,
it's
though.
just such
First
a
baseman.
it's such a narrow path to walk because yeah, there's gonna be guys who don't want to come to Gary because it's Gary. There's guys who don't want to come to Gary for other reasons. There's guys who are probably going back to their team. There's free agents because they're seeing if they get picked up. There's guys who are no longer free agents. There's young guys who aren't going to be ready to go in the American Association. It leaves you with like a handful. So it's just trying to pick what you got and who you can afford. It's not an easy situation, but I
You
don't know.
know, if we're just going to be in the business of throwing out some names here, which is exactly what I'm about to do,
Fair enough.
a guy like Reeves Martin is an
Mm.
interesting guy to me. Was part of that disaster in New England.
That's
Great
who to
year.
pick from. Yeah.
Yeah. Great year. Was a bullpen guy, but I mean, hey, you need bullpen guys. I think it could possibly work. I mean, a 247 and 51 innings is solid.
Still
Nowhere.
unsigned, I think.
I
that true?
think so. If not, even still new management over there. So I got to imagine Edmondson's out. At least he should be. And I mean, it wasn't a good year and it was poor roster construction. That's my basis on that. But, and also, I mean, nothing worked there. New ownership, new start. Let's do that. And new brand too, which I do kind of like. But any case, back to the point here, he's one guy I'm interested in. I noticed there was some Pioneer League crossover in the current Gary roster, a little
Mhm.
bit of Rocky Mountain there. So a guy like Blaine Traxel in New York is an interesting proposal. Two, a starter, 19 starts, 120 innings, 359 ERA. Allow 12 home runs, but you have the short porch in either side in Rockland. So that's kind of, it could be good, could be bad, deep center field there. Only 29 walks across there. That's what really drew my eye to him. Lets up hits. I mean, 123. So that's not what you want to see and doesn't strike out a lot of guys, but he still could be a solid enough four. I think he can scale up and we could adjust it to taste there. 24 on opening day. So definitely something there. Reeves I like too because he's 28 right now, so maybe wants to take that next step. Also born on Christmas Day, so that's kind of cool. So that's a couple of guys I see here.
Solid left-handed hitter. It's a good power bat.
I think I may have found that for you as well. Steve Barmacken, left-handed hitter, looks like a third baseman and corner outfielder. Was with the Boulders last year. Slash line is looking 331, 419, 436. So he's not hitting for power. That's something that ain't gonna happen. 17 stolen bases in 82 games, so a little bit of, you gotta throw over every now and then, but he's not gonna light the world on fire. But he gets on base. And that's something that we could use here. I don't know if you have a third baseman lined up yet or not for the year, but that could
No.
be okay.
So with
I was
they owe us. They got Tommy.
Ball Raven.
Yeah,
Okay.
they owe us.
He was in New York for a little bit too.
Mhm.
Maybe you could get something cooking there with TJ.
Is there anything that you guys are still thinking that we haven't gone over yet with the
no,
discussion?
I don't know. I would just reiterate like the need for a system. Like I
Yeah.
would even say more than it is building to win right now. Like I think it's setting in motion the process of building rapport with guys, bringing in young guys who have a chance to get signed to build that reputation that you'll get guys signed. Worst case scenario is they are bad and you can get rid of them. Middle ground area is they're actually pretty good and you can keep them around even if they don't get signed, and then you bring them into your future plans instead of what feels like just now. And I think you guys kind of have also acknowledged and spoken to it from the people who see it day in, day out. More just, oh, there's a hole in the boat, throw some tape on it. Oh, now there's a hole over here. And I think make it more intentional and come into it with understanding that, like, yeah, there's going to be some holes here, but not forever. It feels like this is just what we're doing now. That's got to stop. And I think somebody has to sort of put their foot down, put that system in place of here's how we go about this. Here's the guys that we keep on call so we don't have series that we just punt because we have nothing left. And we can prevent those 7, 8 game losing streaks once we hit 3 or 4. And it's funny how many more, even if you take every time you lose like 6 in a row, if you just get one win back, all right, now we're up 3 or 4 more wins during the year and 3 or 4 less big losing streaks, and that helps. I think that's kind of the angle you got to go at it. Whether it's, stepping back from anything that could be considered criticism of Lamar, criticism of the guys on the roster, even if this is the roster they're going with, which I've expressed my concerns with, there are ways to operate this roster in a way that is productive. It might not win a lot. The projections hold them right now at 34 wins, which is better than last year, by the way. So maybe I'll shut my mouth, but I think there's a way to work with it, which is healthy, productive, and develops people and creates a good reputation as a good place to play. And that will do more than anything. More than scrounging together 5 to 10 more wins and still being second to last in the division. That would be huge, is settling in a process and a reputation for being a good place to play.
Do
Yeah.
you get many extra points by having 2 mascots versus 1?
Yes. Substantially more. Yes.
So definitely what you're saying in your professional outside view is that if we did bring back Rascal instead of just having Rusty the RailCat, that we could potentially increase by 1 or 2 points our karma level.
What I'm saying is when I was in Wilmington, they had Rocky Blue Ankle and they had a sort of inflatable guy named Rubble who briefly came out around the early 2000s and never really appeared again. And then
my
Mr.
God,
Celery
remember
was
it?
a thing.
Yes,
And-
Mr. Celery.
And Mr. Celery was a thing. But still in that closet lurked Rubble.
Right.
And I believe that's when they really started losing and not winning championships anymore after a very successful stretch in the 90s.
Makes sense.
And I got to say, I think when you have Rubble and you ignore it, you become Rubble.
I
And with that,
like
yeah,
that
no,
something.
2 mascots is better than 1.
you're on.
I know I can say certainly when Somerset got rid of General Admission, who was a chap that would dress up in
General
Revolutionary War.
admission was oh my God.
Yes, it was just a random dude that would dress up in colonial American garb, who would then run around normally with some sort of like Betty Ross flag or Somerset Patriot flag, and would lead the Somerset Patriots chant amongst other things. Once they did away with him, didn't make the postseason again. So
And
I think there's
did he
something to it.
come with full uh, uh, gun and bayonet, or
They did not give him a firearm,
okay?
unfortunately.
I
Just
thought
the
a
flag.
musket and bayonet was going to be a necessity there.
I mean, I
He's
don't know
killed
exactly.
before, but it's not in a way approved by any sort of
Exactly.
recent
And I mean,
incident.
like,
Yeah.
in fairness, he can hang his musket over the fireplace now. The only thing he's defending his ballpark from is the people that are illegally parking at Target before they go to the game.
Chuck, you
Yeah.
got any Railcat related questions?
Come on now. As professionals as you are around knowing these different leagues and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you think that it really takes like 4 months for them to have a bobblehead made? Like that's my
Ryan would know this.
like 4 months to get a bobblehead made, and they have to have a lot of lead time when they're going to decide to have bobblehead day. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of it's the shipping, it seems like, because a lot of them are coming from China or wherever they make them right now. But yeah, if I remember, like we had to get them ordered in like January, and that was as long as we didn't have like an early season one. Yeah.
All right.
I do think it's probably it's mostly a shipping thing, and who knows how many bobblehead makers there are over in pick Asian manufacturing country.
That was it. That was
Mm.
my big question. That was my big question.
Okay.
Why don't I get
Yeah,
job
yeah,
offers
related?
from this?
Is RailCats related? Come on now.
I think it's very much
Okay.
RailCat related.
Yeah,
I
you
think it's
know,
to the heart of the issue, actually.
the promotion. You can't
Oh,
get
okay. I've got another one, and this one's
Yeah.
dead serious. And normally I don't talk
Yeah.
about dead serious stuff.
Yeah.
I spoke with Crooks last year
Okay.
and with the Chicago Dogs, and one of the things that he mentioned, and I ran into the lady, was that they have a mental health coach.
Like a
That's
sports
news to me.
psychologist?
They called it a something coach, but it was
Okay.
basically mental health, right?
Hmm.
And that they have this woman that if they have problems or whatever, they talk to her. She kind of really helps them focus on the things that are important, blah blah blah, all that stuff that a
Yeah.
psychologist would do.
Yeah.
But it's more of a life coach slash, little bit of mental aspect of it.
Hmm.
And he said that I guess in the minors that they have basically one per team, not per division or per league or whatever, but actually they have one person that's in charge of a double A, triple A that takes care of all of those players. And he was really happy to see that the Chicago Dogs had one specifically for them. How important do you think that having a coach like that, a mental coach like that, is to having a winning team? And have you heard something like that before?
I think
I
it's
think
extremely important, to be honest. I think if your players aren't, if they're having struggles away from the field or directly related to the performance on the field, it's going to be impossible to pull yourself out of the rut. I mean, most of any sport, I firmly believe it's mental. I mean, obviously, I come from more of a golf background, which is a sport that, quite frankly, is 20% physical, 80% mental. The second you don't have confidence in your own abilities, you're done. It's as simple as that. And so with baseball, I'm sure to a degree it's the same, where it's easy to go into a bad rut, have a bad series where you're 1 for 10 on the road trip, and now you're struggling to get a board or get back there. And we all know these guys typically, you got 2 weeks. You have a bad 2 weeks, you're gone. And so when it's life and death, essentially, as far as your career can be for 2 weeks, to have 2 bad weeks, I can see how that weighs on a guy. And to have someone to go to and talk to, that is invaluable, I think. I do think just given, and I think anyone that knows our show and knows my reporting on Chicago, I think Chicago having it is the biggest surprise here, to be honest.
I would also say, like, I think it's somewhat important to team performance. I think it's I think it's important to like the development of the players. And that I say it that way because I'm not sure that it's necessarily something that will pay off on a given season. It might just be a long-term thing or might help draw guys in. But I think the mental aspect of it, if we're talking sports psychology in general, is a growing thing that more and more guys are becoming accepting of and looking for on just a performance basis. But I think then on the flip side too, a lot of the stuff we see is also more along the lines of like life coaching and life skills. And I think that's really vital for a team where, if we're honest, I mean, the majority, if not every guy, is really gonna. It's like the NCAA thing of like they're gonna go pro in something other than sports, and you see a lot of guys who leave the sport and simply just have no life skills, which is crazy, but it makes sense when you look at it. And preparing people to be successful adults in the world beyond the game, I think is a key thing, and I think it's even from an organization perspective, something that's good just as a benefit to everybody involved and, the people around these guys too. So yeah, I like to hear that. I think more teams should get involved with it, but also most teams can't afford anything, let alone the things that they should have, let alone, a lot of them don't have what they need to have.
There you go.
Well,
All right. Done with my
that-
question. I contributed to this conversation.
Yes.
I earned my paycheck.
Well, Chuck and I both appreciate both of your times. We're not big with plugging because
Yeah.
we're so niche in general.
Yeah.
Most people that already know kind of where we're at. But for you guys, we'll make this special exception. So go ahead and plug away whoever wants to go first.
I'll let Ryan with his true crime show go first. Go.
Dude,
Announce the true
That's
crime
finally
thing.
almost ready. I did get the go ahead to post that, so it should be soon. I'm excited.
Yes. True
So
crime.
Indie Ball Nation on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and podcast platforms. I think I'm not missing anything, but yeah, it's a mess. It's a garbage fire. We're all over the board. I have like two larger videos coming out shortly, including hopefully that true crime one I just mentioned, which is not baseball related. I went down such a rabbit hole and had no self-control. And then the one that I just dropped today. In the meantime, while I'm working on another deep dive into a Pioneer League team. So like on one hand, you have like current events and analytics and dumb baseball stories, and then like now it's my buddy and I playing Deal or No Deal to pick him a indie ball team to cheer for. We're all over the board. So if you want some weird baseball content, especially during your off season, it's there. It's something. It's around. That was a good advertisement. I think I nailed that. I think I used my
spot
marketing
on.
degree to its full extent.
The Deal or No Deal. I
Yeah.
give you guys props on the Deal or No Deal episode.
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely loved it. That
You
was
might
All right,
like the
awesome.
you might like the new video I just put up then, because we amped that one up and it got real dumb, but it was fun.
All right.
Hey, that's better.
Nick,
Yeah.
your turn.
Yeah. So Indie Ball Pod on Twitter, Indie Ball Report everywhere else on all platforms. If you don't listen, Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, all that jazz. You can find it there. Put up an article about 2 weeks back on All-Star games and fixing them. Got some feedback from that. Thought I was pretty good there. Should have a video up either on the 30th or 31st about New Year's resolutions in regard to each of the four major independent leagues. I know timely as can be because what screams February 1st like New Year's resolutions? And yeah, outside of that, don't have too much else going on. I will have another article up in the middle of February. That's essentially if every mascot got into a battle royale, who would win? So we'll see with that. Yeah, and then I guess for the show we're gonna record tomorrow or 24 hours from now, more accurately, we're doing the manager report card, right? We agreed to do that?
Yeah, I think we're doing manager report card this week.
Oh, cool. This is one where we're gonna get a lot of feedback and have like 5 different managers go, "Why did you give me a B plus?" and go, "Well, buddy, Results
Because we're
matter.
being nice.
Bulletin content right there. Bulletin board content.
We already ended
As
up on
my
Juliet's
kids would say,
bulletin
bulletin board
board.
material.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
So there's
Damn.
that. We'll have interviews and stuff going up here. And yeah, that's all I got to promote. And I will say one great promotion idea, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. I want to see a fallback series, which simply means we bring in some like local graphic design guys. They design jerseys from what this team would look like from each era. So let's use Gary for an example. If Gary played baseball in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, what would their jersey design look like for that? We go ahead, we do a screen printed run on them. Maybe we do, say, first 100 fans get a cheaper version of that jersey that you give away at the gate. And then at the end of the game, we auction off the jerseys. You have the silent auction throughout the night, set it up on a table in the concourse. You win the jersey, they get announced over the PA, or they call you to customer service, whatever it may be. They bring you down on the field at the end. You get the player to give them the jersey right off the back, sign it, hand it to them right there like that. Could be a great way. You have it running as a series throughout the year, say, because jerseys are expensive. Do like 4 of them, and yeah, you have it run like, say, I don't know, first Friday of each month, first Friday home game of each month. Great way to try to drive people to the gate there on what should already be a good night, but you could supercharge it. Or hey, pick a Tuesday or something if it's a low attendance night. Obviously, middle of the week's always harder. That's just universal problem. So I think it's a good idea. I like to see somebody try it. Get community engagement, can make a big deal out of it. Just an idea.
We had '90s day last year, and we had
Yeah.
'90s jerseys and gave away
It's a
'90s
vibe.
credit cards.
I like the vibe there. That's a
Nice.
good vibe.
Yep.
Jerseys were okay. I
Yeah.
had a couple of them.
Oh,
Little
nice.
bit too saved by the bell for me, but
Ah,
they were okay.
We need to get a little bit more like a Nirvana type vibe to it, I think. Is what we
Yeah,
need to go
I
for.
can go with that. Well, I'll tell you
grunge
what.
baseball.
I'll tell you what. I'm not a guy that's sold very easily on doing things with my time, but
Yeah.
both of you guys have sold me on your podcasts, and so
I
I am
appreciate
going
that.
to commit to giving a listen, which I'm already kicking myself for even saying that out loud. But I'm gonna give it a listen and see. And
All right.
I appreciate you guys' time.
Yeah, I appreciate the future listeners. I appreciate you guys having us on.
Yeah,
It's fun to be on this side of things.
You can-
I know it's a little odd. I know you guys are typically on the other side, and I had when I was with you the first and second time I was on with you guys, an absolute blast. So this was even better because I was on the other side of it, and I got to ask the
Yeah.
questions and
Yeah, and all I
put you in the hot seat.
You mentioned New Year's resolutions coming out in February.
Yes.
I'm just hoping that I'm not going to be dealing with the RailCats Groundhog Day scenario that it looks like we might be running into.
It won't be. We'll keep them a bit more focused. I will tell you already, I know exactly which league is not going to be thrilled with me. I know the exact one.
I already know which one you're thinking, but I'm more
I'm
more
right,
like
though. You know I'm right.
Gary. I like to think of it more like it's what is it? A Christmas Carol, where it's like it's not too late. You can still change.
Nope.
Oh,
Gotta
Oh.
sign a Christmas ham to the roster.
Oh my God.
well, like I said, I appreciate you guys hopping on, and maybe down the road, maybe in the off season, we could have another conversation about Gary, so that way you get all your Gary finesse out of there, so you don't have to bore the other
wait till
listeners.
get 2/3 of the way down, and you guys could be like, "I told you so," or you could be like, "I don't know how they pulled this out."
Hey, yeah,
I would
mean,
love to. If
whenever.
you have to
This
come
is
back
what
on.
This is my life apparently. So yeah, I mean, whenever. Just shoot me a
Alrighty.
text.
Just shoot me the
I
text.
sure will.
I thought you were going to leave it at just shoot me.
Also there.
Well, after I'm done editing this, I may shoot myself. But
Yeah, it's
Oh,
gonna be a tough one.
This is
Sorry
my
about
feeling
that.
every week, buddy. 3 hour, you get the file, you're like, what's it gonna be this week? And you click and you're like, 235. Ah, man. And you click it one week,
yeah.
you're like, 135. Yes, I'll have a night still.
typically it's like 30 minutes.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
No,
Whoops.
Mm,
Could be a multi-part.
It's
you know
alright.
what?
This should be multi.
Whether it's a long one or not, I don't
Yeah.
have to deal with any of that stuff.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah. You and Ryan got something in common then, don't you?
Yeah.
It's okay. I said to edit a damn hour of Deal or No Deal, so don't get me started.
I don't want to hear it from you.
All right, you guys have a good rest of your night. Thank
Yeah.
you
All right,
again
thanks,
for-
guys.
Y'all
too.
too.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
y'all.
you again for having us on. Appreciate it,
No
guys.
problem. And that will wrap up the discussion that we had about the RailCats with Nick and Ryan. Again, I appreciate them coming on. We spent probably close to 3.5, 4 hours discussing RailCats baseball, independent baseball, and other off-the-wall topics. We recorded for about 2 hours and 45 minutes. I was able to cut about 30 minutes out of it. So I'm giving Nick the full uncut version of all of this, so there might be some more in his episodes if he does decide to cut some of it up and release some of it. So maybe that'll entice you a little bit more to go over and to listen to their stuff. I really highly recommend listening to their stuff. It may be a lot since they cover almost every independent baseball team, but they have so much good stuff to talk about, and they go down rabbit holes. So if you're a person like going down rabbit holes, this is a perfect podcast for you. And then it's just baseball wrapped for you. They do some really good content. They really put everything that they have into it. So hopefully you guys got a little glimpse of what they do on this show, on their actual show. So be sure to follow Indy Ball Report and Indy Ball Nation on their respective platforms. And I'll leave all of that information down below so you can go and give them a good checkout. But this should be out Sunday. And then me and Chuck will be recording on Sunday night to discuss weekly transactions and stuff as well. So that episode should come out about Monday, Tuesday, depending on how lazy I want to be, or proactive, one of the two. Anyways, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your evening, whenever you're watching this, and go Cats.
The 0-2. Swing and a miss, strike three. Wrap this one up in green and white.